All right, I'm jumping on Discord so we can have actually some audio quality.
Cool.
The only way people are going to ever see me in Discord or, on stream anymore is that they get somebody to pick me up.
Well, if you cam up, I might change the scene. But for now...
I highly doubt I will do that.
For now, we watch Solid JJ. And here we go. What up, Kyle?
Hey, Professor, you said you wanted to talk to me?
Yes, Ash, I did. Okay, well, what's going on?
Well, Ash, to be frank with you, there are some details about the world of Pokemon that I
Deliberately kept from you, and...
Now that some of those things have come to light, I think it's best that if you were to hear about it, it comes from me.
Ooh, cool. So like new Pokemon?
Yeah, all right. Well, lay it on me, Professor. What's the scoop?
And so now every Typhlosion is now part Pokemon and part human.
Did you get all that?
Why does any of that exist? What are you telling me right now,
No
Professor?
aggression.
Well,
Everything's fine.
I never wanted to tell you. I didn't want to share this agony with you, but it leaked out, so you had to find out somehow.
Now what about the artillery? I mean, he had relations with it, threw it back in the river, and then came back for the same one.
What?
What you hung up about?
This is already weird enough, but I'm just thinking about it. Like, there
Solid,
are more
JJ.
humanoid Pokemon out there, but all these stories they're going after the fucking bears, the
I know.
Oh,
What's
God.
wrong with you? I mean, you're sending a 10-year-old to a world like this,
What's the
and any
Pokemon
point you could be walking in Viridian Forest, and a bigger Pokemon could have just come
I
in and...
gave you Pokemon to defend yourself.
That's the
What
problem.
else did you want?
No, I guess you should have given me mace or something. I don't know what to expect anymore. How could you look me in the eye knowing this and send me
Well,
out?
Ash, all of this is a moot point, all right? Because it's not even real, all right? This is all folklore. It's fictional. It's written from ancient times.
Okay, if it's folklore, then what kind of message could you possibly extrapolate from being fooled into having babies with a Typhlosion?
Bad idea. Don't do it.
What?
Ash, what am I supposed to
Exactly.
say? It's fiction. It didn't
Why would
happen.
that resolve anything? Someone still wrote that. Why would they
Oh,
write
basically,
that? Why would they live in a
it's
world
that,
doesn't exist?
I wasn't happy to find
Professor
out about it too,
Oak
all
fucked
right?
a
We tried
Typhlosion,
to
and now
bury
all
this.
The
Typhlosions are
Pokemon
part
community
human.
agreed never to tell anyone about this. What
Okay.
It's come out. It's been
Yeah,
legal.
that's the joke here.
All of that
It's-
aside,
that's
all of
wild.
that insanity, because that's what it is. It's insanity aside.
Very much.
You're mentioning a lot of Pokemon that existed at one point, apparently, but I've never heard about any of them.
Ah, well, yes, of course. Well, that's because they were canceled.
What does that mean?
Well, simply, they just never happened. They never existed.
Okay, but if they never existed, then how do you know
Well,
them?
because we have records of them.
Okay, so what are the records based on?
Absolutely nothing, because they never existed.
All right, I've got enough comments about the bits that go on too long, so I'm not gonna press you more.
Listen, Ash, human beings are curious creatures by nature.
Sometimes they'll dig a little bit deeper than they should and find some things they didn't want to know.
But really, who's to blame? The people who wrote it or the people that found it?
Yeah, I'm going with the guy who wrote it.
No, you gotta think about it a
No,
little bit
no,
more.
no. If you write Pokemon fucking
What?
each other and babies and stuff, that's you. That's not us.
It's a little bit more than that.
No, I think there's a fine line that was
Well,
crossed.
agree to disagree.
Okay, but what about artillery though? I mean, like he fucked it, threw it back in the river, came back the next day, found the exact same one, and then fucked it again. Why not take it home? Why not give it a bad? Give it a
Ash,
bad.
listen, there's no way we can go back in time and figure out what was going through their minds when they wrote that, all right? It is what it is. We have to live with it now.
How did this even get out again?
All right, everybody, look
Why are
around.
you thinking
We're
about that,
bound to
Moon?
find some rare Pokemon in
Hey.
here.
Or some
Okay.
dazzling artifacts.
Ooh, looky here. Without all this was, it's bound to be worth a gem.
Oh, that's screwed
Let's
up.
see what we got. Soon the Typhlosion took the
What
girl
else is
and...
new?
Oh my
Holy
god.
shit!
Oh, roommate was a Typhlosion.
God, what else does it say? You see, now this one confuses
Yeah,
me.
I don't get it. Why do you go back to the same river? Just take
It
it
just
home.
doesn't make any sense.
My name's JJ and I'm here to say I'm here.
And just for Kyle. All right, on to the TierZoo.
So, are we attempting to give Kyle a heart attack?
A little bit.
Fair enough.
All right, so we're going to start with the hyenas because apropos of nothing, we get that info. I come to your house while you're at work and remove 75% of the cushion on your row machine. Don't do that. That's not fair.
Made it halfway! Stop them! The mission area is yours! More enemies spotted. It's now or never! Stop them! They captured the mission
Oh,
area!
no.
Well, you can't expect to win them all.
The hyena may be one of the most misunderstood characters in the entire game. hyena mains get flamed constantly with insults like cowardly, underhanded, and stupid, when in reality, they're one of the most interesting, powerful, and effective characters of them all. They have several abilities which grant them unique advantages seen almost nowhere else in the game, and a stat spread that is undoubtedly very unorthodox for a member of the carnivorous mammal faction. So today, let's examine the stats and abilities of the hyena to get a better sense of their true strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately decide where they fall on the tier list. First, let's do a quick overview of how exactly the hyena became such a popular character to pick in the current meta. Perhaps one of the most counterintuitive facts about the hyena is that the hyena is a feliform, meaning it is more closely related to builds like lions and tigers, not wolves or bears. This is strange because clearly in terms of the majority of their basic traits, the hyena is very canine-like. There are a few different subtypes of the hyena build, but this video is going to focus mostly on the spotted hyena, simply because it is by far the most competitively viable. But I will discuss the other subtypes later on in the video. Next, let's do an examination of the spotted hyena's base stats to see if we can pick out any obvious standout strengths or weaknesses. And right away, one thing we can spot is just how high the hyena's power stat is. The hyena's bite force is one of the highest in the game, especially when you account for size. Sure, the Nile crocodile and hippopotamus have more powerful bites, but they're all several times larger than your average hyena. But for a mid-sized carnivorous mammal, the hyena is a huge outlier in terms of its bite force. Moving on to mobility, this one's a bit tricky. Mobility is their second highest stat, and indeed, hyenas are quite excellent runners if viewed in a vacuum. But taken in proper context, it is a bit more of a mixed bag. The hyena actually has one of the lowest top speeds of any carnivorous mammal build in the African savanna server. Now, top speed isn't the end-all be-all of mobility. Because of a special ability we'll discuss later, the hyena's stamina is effectively doubled compared to that of similarly sized predators, allowing it to chase other players for a greatly extended distance. Now, because of its lower top speed, it usually cannot close the distance on its own during pursuit, but a lot can happen during an extended chase, and there's very little room for error when being chased by hyenas. Still, having an unimpressive top speed does present some vulnerabilities in the hyena's strategy. In addition to potentially getting dusted by your hunting target during a chase, having weaker burst mobility options gives you less opportunity to retreat should an opponent decide to counterattack. This makes it tougher to pressure opponents who are standing their ground, as you can't weave in and out of their attack range as safely, and could easily get hit for serious damage if you aren't careful. Which brings me to their next stats, HP and defense. Hyenas exhibit surprisingly high toughness in combat, being able to walk off a decent amount of damage. Still, given just how insanely stacked the African meta is, even with above average tankiness, there's still very little room for mistakes in combat. They're still nowhere near as durable as, say, the honey badger, the gold standard for absurdly high defense stats in
badgers don't give a fuck.
Still, gotta give credit where it's due. Hyenas can handle your average scrap just fine, which is kind of necessary.
There's some crazy looking
their
animals,
stat.
Kyle.
Their intelligence is hard to place.
These things aren't
On one
real,
hand,
but
they are excellent pack hunters,
fuck
able
if
to
they aren't out
coordinate
there.
hunts and attack from multiple directions. This offsets the disadvantages of their lower movement speed a bit, and also makes their attacks very hard to defend against alone. However, hyena clans are also some of the least safe teams to be on, with friendly fire being uniquely commonplace.
Are you serious?
Most teams experience at least some dueling between clanmates, but typically this is confined either to
what do you
specific
expect?
seasonal
Cats
events
getting
like
together
Rut,
in
or
packs,
as a
there's
result
gonna
of
be
the party
infighting.
leader securing dominance.
Fair enough.
With hyenas, the fights are fairly constant, especially after a successful hunt, as party members must then compete for loot. This stands in contrast to other top predators of the server, like wild dogs.
Gotta see this thing. Oh, that's a weird Pokemon right there.
Yeah.
What?
Look at them jeets.
What the damn hell? All right.
Dogs, which have a much less competitive process to split loot. So it's surprising that a build with such high intelligence is prone to as much friendly fire as, say, a rhinoceros. For stealth, hyenas do have some fairly decent camouflage, but this is almost entirely negated by how much noise hyenas make. Hyenas are notoriously loud, not only in their vocalizations, their signature laughs and chirps, but also their movement. Their running gait is a sort of gallop, which is significantly louder than the careful steps of other feliform predators. Couple that with their lack of retractable claws, and they really just have a very difficult time concealing their presence as they approach hunting targets. In fact, among their competition, hyenas are more likely to get ambushed themselves than actually
there was some feliform ancestor that looked at dogs and was just like, you know, I want to do that.
They aren't all that good at detecting hidden players, but do have an ear for sensing commotion they might be able to jump into. Their sense of smell is also acutely attuned to being able to detect carrion, aiding them in their quest to scavenge. Next, the hyena's special abilities. There are two main
The
ones.
answer is
The first
definitively
is the
no,
hyena's
Kyle.
disease resistance.
Please, God, no.
Hyenas are second only to vultures in their ability to ignore poison damage from bacteria and
Are you
viruses.
serious?
Now, disease resistance is pretty much always useful. It increases
I mean,
the character's chances to
scavengers
recover
being
from injury
disease
and
resistant
lowers
is
the
kind
chance
of
of just getting one-shot out of nowhere
necessary.
by a random illness.
Yeah.
But having a supercharged immune system
I
is
mean, wouldn't you call that evolution at play?
Yeah, you know, you start eating carrion as a primary food source, which is filled with disease. You're gonna have to evolve disease resistance pretty fucking quick.
I don't see how this is in question. That is great.
is an expansion
Yeah.
ability that comes with some downsides too. So
Well,
this needs to
Tiberius
serve a dual
left.
purpose. And in this case, it's probably pretty
Maybe he
obvious.
didn't like
This
the
ability
Pokemon.
dramatically expands the options they have to scavenge from. For most carnivorous characters, the window for scavenging a carcass closes pretty quickly, especially under the heat of the African sun. Careless players can easily incur the food poisoning debuff if they aren't careful picking at old remains. Hyenas can get away with being a lot less cautious in this regard. This synergizes extremely well with their high bite
I'm
count,
loving the fact that it
which
was just
enables them to crack
a
open
vulture and a
carcasses
hyena
with
right
bones,
there,
a trait which
you know,
puts them
chilling.
into a pretty
Ducks are
exclusive club of
ridiculous,
builds which
huh?
are able to reliably access
Corkscrew
marrow as a
dicks.
form of sustenance. When it comes to large
Oh, yeah.
bones, it's pretty much just humans, hyenas,
Well,
and
corkscrew
crocodilians that are
dicks to
actually
get
able
through
to
that
crack them.
corkscrew
Their
vagina.
second ability is their massive
Right.
heart, which is roughly double the size of similar carnivorous builds. This grants them effectively twice as much endurance as they otherwise would have, which helps offset their lack of speed outright.
Don't ruin
Even if they can't
penguins for me.
outspeed their
I-
targets,
don't
they're
ruin the
usually able to
penguins.
outlast them and catch them once they run out of
I
stamina.
mean,
There's not too
I
much else
already
to say
had
on this
penguins
ability, it's
ruined
pretty
for me
straightforward,
in
but
that
one thing I thought
everything
might
you have
also be
ever thought of
interesting-
as a penguin is not actually a penguin. The first thing we called a penguin was a completely different species, like looked like not even that closely related.
It's called a giant auk.
Yeah, a auk spelled A-U-K. That was the original penguin. And then we found the fuckers that we call penguins down south, and they're like, oh, hey, these kind of look like the giant auk. So these are also penguins, and then we found out, actually, no, they're not closely related. So, yeah, every penguin you have likely ever seen is a false penguin. Yes, A-U-K.
Why?
Because history is weird.
I've been lied to about penguins.
Yes,
You're
you
a
have.
false penguin.
We
yeah.
all have, yes. I am a false penguin. I'm fine with this. Penguin identity theft, yes.
It's more like penguin identity erasure. This is terrible. I don't even know what form of racism this is.
Mega propaganda.
Thing is to talk about which abilities the hyena does not have, since I think that can oftentimes be just as informative as to which advantages and disadvantages they
so
exhibit
dead.
as talking about which abilities they do have. One of the most striking absences is retractable claws. Hyenas are part
Yeah,
of the
why don't they have
feliform faction,
retractable
meaning that
claws?
if they wanted to spec into that ability, it is available
Oh.
to them. In fact, before they reallocated their evolution points into higher bite damage and disease resistance, they actually did have retractable claws, which likely would have given them higher stealth, the ability to climb, and higher slashing damage. But for whatever reason, the most popular strategy for the proto-hyena build needed all the help it can get in terms of run speed, so keeping the claws unretracted as a means of traction was a worthwhile sacrifice. Another interesting absence is a tail. Hyenas have extremely short tails, which locks them out of a lot of potential abilities. Now, obviously, I'm not going to rag on hyenas too hard for not having a prehensile tail or anything like that. I'm a human main myself, so it's not like I don't understand the
Build the
upside of
walls, not the
sacrificing
fake
access to
penguins.
tail-based
Oh,
abilities.
shit!
But still, among
Right?
carnivorous builds in
Oh,
the
that
African
poor fucking
savanna,
cat. I'd never
tails
seen
can
that
be
video.
useful
I wanna
counterweights
run
that
that
provide
back.
stability. I'm not going to rag on hyenas too hard for not having a prehensile tail or anything like that. I'm a human main myself, so it's not like I don't understand the
tail
upside
on
of
fucking
sacrificing
fire.
access to
Oh,
tail-based
jeez.
abilities.
Run,
But
cat.
still,
Holy
among
shit.
carnivorous builds in the
This is
African
looking at it like,
savanna,
oh, wow,
tails
pretty.
can be useful counterweights that provide stability during a chase, lowering the chances that a player might trip and fall if they take a wrong step. It's interesting, one of the benefits to not having a long tail is just that it's one less thing that other players can attack. Given that hyenas heavily favor attacking the back end of a target, and even had been known to bite off
I mean,
tails, I have to wonder
safest
if
direction to attack a hippo from is obviously the back.
Yeah, you don't want to be in front of it at any point.
Definitely not.
hyenas simply have been opting for shorter tails just so that they don't get griefed by their fellow hyena men.
Griefing.
Next, let's talk about their matchups.
Yep.
Given
the
that they
wild.
compete for the same prey, the most important matchup for hyenas is the lion matchup. Unfortunately, even though hyenas have a much higher bite force, in 1v1 combat the lion's reach advantage and size advantage are too powerful, resulting in this being an almost completely one-sided matchup. A few paw swipes comboed into a bite to the neck will zero to death a hyena basically every time, and there's not much counterplay a hyena has alone, especially given that the lion is able to sprint faster over short distances, so the hyena can't even run away. Hyena mains are often depicted as thieves, and while they do often steal kills when they get a chance, when it comes to lions it's almost always the other way
Chaos
around.
and
Lion
griefers.
players love to score free loot by chasing away hyenas, and unfortunately even with the whole squad together it only takes a few lions to drive them away. Now not all is lost in this scenario. This is actually one of the situations where the bone-crushing bite is most useful, as there's still lots of
Very
bone
kind of
marrow
you, Kyle.
left after lions finish looting the kill that only hyenas can access. But still, this matchup is rough, and it's hard to even imagine what ways the hyena could respec in order to challenge the lion. Lions are really the only problematic matchup though. Hyenas go pretty even with leopards, with the only real pain point being the hyena's lack of ability to climb. Leopards exploit this by dragging their kills up into trees where hyenas can't contest them. But this also puts the leopard in a pretty vulnerable position, and if the hyena clan is large enough, they can essentially trap the leopard player. And as for cheetahs, I mean, do I really even need to say anything? They pretty much have to avoid hunting anywhere near hyenas, otherwise their efforts are all but guaranteed to be in vain. Cheetahs have essentially no options when it comes to defending their kills from
Well, now I'm not
hyenas.
going to watch the movie,
And they can't
Kyle.
climb either, so there's nowhere to stash their loot for later. So with all this being said, where do hyenas belong on the tier list? This is where some distinction between the different hyena variants is necessary. The striped hyena and brown hyena both have a lower power stat and mobility stat than the spotted hyena, and focus more heavily on scavenging. Instead, they put more points into defense and perception, aiding them in finding carrion far away. Ultimately, I consider these builds to be a lot less viable, as they have to rely on griefing noobs and janitoring in order to get by. I would rank them in C tier. The spotted hyena, however, is a much different story. It is legitimately one of the most powerful builds in the entire African metagame, and can hold its own amid some intense hostilities. Its special abilities enable it to subvert some of the downsides that come with sharing territory with a larger predator. However, much as I am tempted to be a contrarian and give them the rank of S tier, I don't think anything about the hyena is truly game warping enough to merit that top tier rank. They do still have bad matchups, and even for their more evenly matched ones, they can't get carried.
He knocked the rings out that boy.
Hyenas are a serious force to be reckoned with, and easily deserve the rank of A tier. Among hyenas, friendly fire isn't a mistake. It's part of the meta. When high-value loot is on the line, trust goes out the window. If you've ever wanted to see me embrace that same cutthroat strategy, you need to check out The Getaway.
Well, at least
In this
until they show
series,
the mating
6
habits of the
content creators,
hyena.
including yours truly, compete for a $10,000 prize.
I'm pretty sure
but
this
there's
is
a
the
twist. They told
like,
me I'm the traitor.
put
The
the
real
promo
twist,
shit
they
at the
told
end of the
everyone
video.
else the same thing. This was made possible by the team behind Half is Interesting and Jetlag the Game, and you can only watch it on Nebula.
It's Nebula.
Nebula is a creator-owned platform where we make the content we want. Best of all, this is becoming human. Debrief
you're
about
basically at
that
the end.
moment when the alpaca spat in my mouth. Use my link supporting this
Fair
video. Thank you for watching, and as always,
All right, now on to wolves.
in the ice age, the Tundra server was filled with incredibly overpowered beasts.
Tundra server.
Smilodon's Saber Fang perk enabled it to one-shot nearly any other player in the game. The short-faced bear was seemingly invincible.
I'm wondering if there's one on
carnivorous mammal
Peacocks.
build of all time. And the cave hyena had an absurdly powerful
don't-
bite.
I doubt
able
it,
to
but
crack bones and tear
fuck, who
incredible
knows?
amounts of flesh with every bite. Yet, of the Ice Age's top predators, the one which proved to
I
be
don't
the
know, I've
most
seen some
resilient
Africans
and
with
indeed the most
hyenas on
successful
leashes, so-
was the wolf. Even though wolves are nowhere near as massive
got no
or as
real
powerful
answer.
as these other Ice Age monsters, today the wolf build is practically synonymous with ferocity
Closest he
and
got
hunting
is
predators. But what is it about
a
wolves that made
a
them such
bird
force in
tier
nature?
list, and the
Today we'll
peacock
find
made
out.
D tier.
Oof.
So wolves are part of the carnivoran archetype, which became popular during the Miocene update. The main perk of this archetype is something called carnival teeth, a trait which greatly improves the ability of carnivorous builds to consume food. Rather than needing to swallow things whole, or mercilessly slam dunking the daylights out of things until they fall apart, carnival teeth enable the player to bite off small chunks of meat, which might seem like a small thing, but really it opens up tons
I mean,
of new
definitely,
opportunities
Moon.
for
I wouldn't leave it with
carnivorous
my
playstyles,
kids.
including
Like,
for
yeah,
scavenging
the
carcasses
hyena's
and for
babysitting.
sharing larger kills among teammates. The carnivoran archetype is split into two main factions, feliforms and caniforms. There are a ton of differences between these two, but I'll try and simplify them into how the differences play out in practice. At their core, feliforms
seen them with
are adapted
baboons
to
on
being
leashes.
hypercarnivorous ambush predators.
I don't
whereas
have that much
caniforms
trust.
are more generalist in nature. This is most obvious in their snouts, which have different shapes and lengths. Caniforms tend to have longer, less compact snouts.
That's right,
This
there's your
enables them to
caniforms.
carry a wide range of different types of teeth, suited for a more omnivorous playstyle. You have some teeth for dealing damage, some for shearing meat, some for crunching bones or nuts, and even some for chewing on plant fibers. Meanwhile, feliforms have shorter snouts, enabling them to have a higher bite force, but limiting them to pretty much only having teeth meant for either dealing damage or shearing chunks of meat. The longer caniform snout gives them other advantages too. The larger nasal cavity enables them to breathe more efficiently and intake more oxygen. This gives caniform builds much greater stamina, enabling them to run for much greater distances without tiring. It also facilitates their vastly superior sense of smell, which enables them to track prey, scavenge for food, and find teammates. So it makes sense why just about every feliform build is an ambush predator, whereas caniforms can be anything from acrobatic marine builds.
Okay, so we got into that whole thing about cat natures in that conversation. And it literally comes down to the way they're able to spot prey.
Pretty much, yeah.
Run it back one more time for that.
I mean, well, it's not just spotting prey, it's ambush predator. So it's not just about spotting, it's about being able to quickly overtake. Whereas caniforms tend to outlast, so it's more about stamina, whereas feliforms are more about speed.
Fair enough.
Enables them to track prey, scavenge for food, and find teammates. So it makes sense why just about every feliform build is an ambush predator, whereas caniforms can be anything from acrobatic marine
and yes,
builds
seals
to
are caniforms.
herbivores.
Really?
Focusing more specifically on wolves, though, pretty much everything I've said so far about the caniform build applies here.
All
But for more in-depth
pinnipeds,
analysis,
walruses,
let's take a look at the
seals,
wolf
sea
space.
lions, all that shit.
Pedipeds.
Yeah, pinniped is the general name for walruses, seals, sea lions, etc.
That's freaking cool.
Yep.
Chase you until you're exhausted. Yeah, seems to be that way.
So, as ferocious as wolves are thought to be, their power stat is fairly mid for an apex predator. Wolves aren't really going to be one-shotting anything larger than a rabbit with their bite attacks. And due to the non-retractability of their claws, they aren't going to be doing much damage with their paw swipe either. And yet,
wolves
taking out players
and
above
other
their own weight
caniforms
class
generally
is a
are
signature
about
aspect
wearing
of the
their
wolf's
prey
strategy.
down.
This is typically done by chaining strings of bite attacks together in order to inflict the bloodlust status condition, which drains the target's health and stamina over time. When executed properly by a pack of wolves, this can bring down basically anything, no matter how large the target. But obviously, since this is not a quick process, there's a lot of room for mistakes, so let's see how wolves handle taking damage rather than dealing it. So due to their lower defense stat, wolves are going to be mostly relying on their agility to avoid damage. They aren't totally defenseless, their thick fur and general bulk does allow them to absorb a few blows
Why are you
if
walking?
necessary, but it's mostly there for warmth, not combat. Their stealth stat is a similar story. Their gray fur overcoat does offer a moderate stealth bonus, but is primarily there for warmth and can be easily spotted except against a few specific backgrounds. As I sort of mentioned during the segment about caniform versus feliform builds, the perception stat is central to the wolf's game plan. Their ability to track scents is quite literally one of the best in the game, able to detect smells from miles away. But their top tier perception stat doesn't end at olfaction. Their sense of hearing is also exceptionally powerful. While many players believe the cat's hearing is superior, in reality they are roughly equivalent in terms of pure sensitivity, but are fine-tuned for different purposes. Cats are much better at sensing higher-pitched sounds, allowing them to detect hidden prey nearby, such as the sound of a mouse breathing under the leaf litter. Wolves are better at sensing low rumbling sounds, meaning they can discern the location of larger prey from miles away. And the same is true for their eyesight. The cat's slitted pupils allow to strike smaller targets with perfect accuracy, but are not as useful as the wolf's large circular pupils for locking onto prey from a long distance. And as I've already alluded to, the wolf's above-average intelligence stat enables some excellent options for teamwork and pack hunting. They can communicate
You're gonna
and
D-tier the
coordinate
wolf,
over
Kyle?
great distances using their howl ability. The combination of teamwork
They become
and
S tier when they got
powerful
humans.
perception abilities allows wolves to control massive territories. We'll get more in-depth
Nah,
into their
it's not
hunting tactics in a
D-tier.
bit. Mobility is their second highest stat, and this greatly assists in their ability to defeat players
I
in
mean,
higher weight
maybe
classes.
on their
Simply
own,
put,
but
wolves have
one
an
of the
incredible amount
biggest
of
advantages of wolves is pack hunting. So,
Yep.
yeah, like, sure, a wolf on its own, I would call it C tier rather than D tier, but a wolf pack is easily high S, if not mid. Or, I'm sorry, high A, if not mid S tier.
The S tier on a t-shirt. We'll put you on a t-shirt. Understand. Wolves will get you.
They will put you on a fucking t-shirt.
Stamina, and can run for longer distances than pretty much anything it could ever encounter. This makes sense, as being able to sense prey from a great distance wouldn't do much good if you had no abilities to run them down. So when you add all of this up, just how effective of a build is the Wolf? It really does come down to how effective their pack hunting abilities are. If you were to strip all of that away, I actually think the Wolf would be mid at best. Their power stat is way below average for an Apex Predator, being more in line with that of a Scavenger or Generalist build. There's no way a lone wolf is bringing down one of the counter many
Are you S tier when I could beat you with a
player,
Buick?
if all you want to do is brief smaller mammal builds
I
like
mean,
rabbits and
then
squirrels,
most things
you're
are
really better
D-tier.
off playing as a smaller caniform, like a fox or a mink. In order to get the most out of a wolf's kit,
I don't
you
know.
need to maximize
You may be able to
utilization
beat
of
a
wolf's
honey
perception
badger
and
with a
stamina.
Buick once, but it's gonna learn and it's gonna fuck up your day.
I'm gonna hit the honey badger with a deuce and a quarter. I quit.
Perks, which are most effective at tracking and hunting larger herbivores. So, wolves really are stuck working together. They'd be wasting their potential hunting only smaller builds, but aren't powerful.
Oh no, I
enough to
closed the
solo
door,
a
I
large
wait.
herbivore. Their kit only makes sense when
Yeah,
it
and they
uses
just
lens
bit your
of hunting.
tires.
And
How did the
indeed,
honey badger
lethality
get
of
in the
wolf's
car? How did it get in the
attack
car?
is undeniable. Through coordinated attacks and clever kiting, wolves are able to prove that their squads are much more cohesive than that of their targets, and split vulnerable members off from their teammates. And at that point, it really is just a waiting game. Now, it's worth noting that even in a group, it's often still
Mace.
too risky to just recklessly
Oh.
attack a tanky
Oh,
herbivore.
no.
Wolf mains tend to only attack a fleeing target, so as long as they hold their ground, they shouldn't take damage. But as they tire from fending off bluff strikes, and as their teammates get further and further away, most players will eventually try and make a break.
Just gets
for it.
in the car.
And this is where the wolf pack will start dealing damage. By taking turns attacking their back end repeatedly,
Yeah.
they'll eventually inflict the Bloodlust status effect, which slowly drains the target's HP, leading to a guaranteed game over, at which point the entire pack splits the loot. This is overpowered in and of itself, but where it really gets broken is when you re-examine the same tactic through the wolf-human team combo. Because all of the
Hey.
things that make the wolf's pack hunting work actually function even more effectively when paired with a human. Humans and wolves are similar in that both are exceptional distance runners, allowing them to naturally keep pace with each other and avoid slowing each other down. But in addition to having similar perks, they also cover each other's weaknesses and fill in the biggest gaps in each other's hunting strategy. Humans lack the same perception
Know
stat
your
that
plays,
wolves have.
Wolf.
While
Oh,
they
hell
can
no.
use their intelligence to sort of
Hey.
supplement their weak sense of hearing and smell,
Wolves are not
there's really no
subordinate to humans in the hunting pair-up. They are that is a symbiosis. Both ends get benefits.
Absolutely.
substitute to just having a teammate who can lock onto a scent at a great distance and never lose it. But why do wolves need humans? You may remember, when wolves hunt, they can oftentimes reach an impasse due to their lack of ability to quickly deal lethal damage. Humans do not have this limitation, and can easily break this stalemate using one of their projectile weapons. The same is true on defense. The wolf's sensory abilities can detect the approach of a dangerous enemy, and alert the humans of the impending threat, a threat that wolves alone would struggle to drive away. And so domestic wolf and human hunter-gatherer players naturally made for an unstoppable force that lasted through multiple balance patches, including the end of
say
the
they
Ice
take
Age
orders,
and the
but I've
beginning
met
of the
plenty of
Anthropocene.
humans that take orders
Eventually,
from
after spending
dogs.
so much time cooperating, many
Yeah, like
wolf
Wick.
players began speccing their characters specifically to better synergize with humans, such as a passive mental health regen aura, and higher intelligence and better communication abilities, which allowed them to handle more complicated
Lola
commands,
takes good care of
eventually
Wick, though.
renaming their build entirely from
She's a
wolf
fine
to dog.
owner.
And because of their optimization towards collaboration, even as humans transitioned away from their hunter-gatherer
You say it's
playstyle,
different,
dogs
but,
still remained a relevant and high-tier
different
choice
isn't
for their
real.
party comp. This isn't to say that the wolf's only good interspecies combo is with a human, though. Among the player base who remained wild, one solid combo is with the raven or crow. They will often seek out
The
a wolf
goat.
player and lead them to a carcass they'd found far away. These POIs are usually hotly contested, and too competitive for a crow to capture by themselves. So, in exchange for leading the wolf there, the wolf will chase away the other players and share the remaining spoils with the bird. But anyway, in short, wolves broke the game by finding the perfect team comp and being the #1 choice of party member for the most overpowered build the game has ever seen. They
Oh.
were already debatably OP
I'll
just
grab
hunting
that.
in
Thanks,
wolf
Grand
packs,
Designs.
but were at least sort of kept in check by their mid damage. But when that limitation is mitigated, their tracking and pursuit hunting abilities are truly
A
unfair
group
to
of
play
Inuits
against.
came to-
And that's why, despite me only giving wolves a rank of A
We'll
tier
watch
on
that
my
after the
King
next
tier list,
TierZoo.
when partnered up with humanity, they are legitimately
And then
broken,
back to more TierZoo.
giving dogs the rank of S tier.
S
Partnering
tier.
up with other highly
Dogs
capable
are S
individuals
tier.
is pretty much always the optimal strategy. And if you've followed my channel for any length of time, you've no doubt heard me talk about my favorite team combo, Nebula. Nebula is a streaming service.
And here's the ad.
Because I gotta do crows.
They just don't know it. Hit 'em from
Oh,
behind.
crows are fucking based.
Hell yeah.
Stop looking at me.
I don't know if they'll bring it up in this video, but like, crows hold a grudge and they recognize faces. You fuck over a crow once, every crow in that neighborhood will know
Primates
who you are for the rest of
for their
fucking
incredibly
time.
broken intelligence
Their
stack.
children and their
which grants them
children's
access to
children and their
incredible
children's
advanced techniques
children's
such
children.
as tool use, coordinated team strategies, and even bartering and trade. But primates are not the only faction in the game with a high intelligence stack. Cetacean, cephalopod, and bird mains also commonly opt not to spec into powerful damage-dealing abilities, and instead invest into leveling up their brain power skill tree. While this does seem like a risky choice, leaving the player more vulnerable in direct 1v1 combat, in actuality this often results in a much less risky playthrough, as the player's intelligence opens up more options for them to progress that don't
crows
require
are
winning in
friends,
combat.
don't make
This
them
is especially
enemies.
true of the bird faction, as their ability to fly already allows them to quickly escape most unfavorable combat encounters.
I've seen
Today,
crows
we're
figure
gonna
out that
discuss
paper
one of the two
equals
main
food.
intelligence-centered
They
bird
legit
builds.
figured out money. They will bring a dollar bill into a fucking bakery and like expect that to get them a pastry. Not even joking. That's a real fucking thing that I've seen crows do.
That's why I'm not allowed to have crows. I'd have an army of them.
The faction that contains crows, ravens, and magpies.
Some
the
dude
Corv.
taught crows commerce.
This video is
Put a
going to
vending
focus
machine with
mostly
seed
on
out and the
crows
crows
as an
figured out the
example,
coins.
but
Nice.
generally what I say in this video
we
should apply
really
to
shouldn't
most
be
birds.
talking about crows. We should be talking about corvids because all corvids are this fucking OP.
True. I'm a fan. Also, don't use fireworks.
Have you ever heard of swooping season in Australia?
No.
Okay, so magpies in Australia during swooping season will literally swoop on humans. And, like, they will swoop and they will take the bike helmet right off your head while you're riding. They will swoop and they will grab tufts of hair if they're angry. Like, Australian magpies are menaces to society, and I am about it.
That's ridiculous. I like it. Thieving magpies.
First, let's discuss
Yes,
their
corvids
stats,
are OP.
as well as the abilities and strategies that exemplify them.
Intelligence
We'll begin
stat
with their
all the
stealth
way
stat,
up.
which corvids aren't particularly excellent in. The most popular corvid skins are either jet black or piebald, neither of which grant the user
probably
that
what it
strong
was
of a
made
stealth
after,
bonus.
Moon.
In fact, in snowy areas, jet black
Gonna
feathers are
F-tier
actually one of
corvids?
the least effective
Kyle.
choices when trying to remain hidden. A dark appearance
doing this
is
on
most
purpose.
effective as camouflage at night,
Yeah.
but
I
crows
ain't
and
taking
other
that bait.
corvids are not nocturnal builds, so they aren't really gaining this benefit from it. Now, granted, stealth typically isn't all that important for birds, given how agile and vigilant they are. Plenty of other high-tier avian builds,
Blue
like
jays are
corvids and
also
parrots,
corvids,
are
just so you know.
arguably some of the least
Really?
stealthy birds in the game, and they
I
do
did not
just
know
fine.
that.
You could
Technically,
even argue
all
that
jays
corvids
are,
even
but
less
most
stealthy
people
than their
only
black
know
feathers
blue jays.
initially appear.
Think I can get away with
as their
owning blue
iridescence
jays?
actually makes them even easier to see for certain other players, typically other birds.
Maybe?
Ultimately, I think it's safe to say stealth is not an important part of their game plan. At least nowhere near as important as it is for ambush predator builds, like an owl. The main predators a crow needs to worry about are raptors.
Like, I know some
and
people
because
keep
of the
crows as
raptor's
pets.
keen eyesight ability,
Yeah, so the stuff you can't have in California: monkeys, hedgehogs, ferrets, Mongolian gerbils, alligators, unfair squirrels.
You can't have ferrets in California?
Can't have ferrets. They
criminal.
are illegal. Monk parakeets,
That's-
raccoons, so I can't have a raccoon army now. Tigers, African clawed frogs, just cuz. Bats, bears, chipmunks, lions, skunks, sugar gliders, Bengal cats, capybaras, snails, lemurs, falcon snakes. Also, I can't have corvids. Sweet.
Wait, you can't have snakes in California?
Yeah, it says snakes.
I feel like I know I feel like I know of a ton of like hurt people in California. So that seems weird. Anyways.
No, it is illegal to own a crow in California because native crows are protected under the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So yeah, I thought so. Okay, they're protected. So, oh well.
It's unlikely having a higher stealth stat would make much of a difference anyway. The crow's defense and constitution stats are fairly average for a bird, which is to say not great. Birds have hollow bones, and their feathers offer fairly little in terms of defense. Feathers do absorb some blunt force damage, but when it comes to slashing and piercing damage, it's nearly useless. And because of their hollow bones, which make them more vulnerable to blunt force damage, the benefit there kind of cancels out as well.
Oh.
Snakes, cats, raccoons, raptors, and dogs all have a high chance of taking a crow out in one hit, so they cannot let their guard down when interacting with any damage to their builds. Given that their playstyle necessitates taking some risk, pro players definitely wish they had more room for error. Thankfully, their next stat makes it pretty easy to avoid damage. The crow's mobility is a little above average for a mid-sized bird, which is to say, excellent. Birds in general are just extremely agile, both on the ground and in the air, making them extremely hard to land an attack on if they see you coming. Some bird builds, like geese and junglefowl, require significant startup in order to get airborne, meaning that they can't rely on their flight to escape danger if the danger is already right in front of them. Crows are not one of these bird builds, and in contrast, the startup on their flight move has some shockingly broken frame data, and allows them to quickly and easily reposition themselves in basically any direction in 3D space almost instantly. This makes their ability to dodge attacks one of the best in the entire game, and makes what would normally be fairly dangerous positions, such as right next to a powerful predator, quite safe as long as the Corvid doesn't use any laggy moves.
I assumed it was actual
This synergizes well with the Corvid's combat moveset, as we'll discuss in a moment. Corvids are blessed with many high stats, but power is not one of them. Their ability to deal damage is one of the weakest in their weight class,
keep and bear
as their
arms,
only
so
attack
I don't know what a
option is a
keep
simple
is,
pecking
but
strike.
I'm definitely finding some of its
This move has
arms.
quick startup and very little end lag, but its damage
So
is
they put
egregiously
all
low.
their points
Simply
into
attacking with this
intelligence
move
and
will
took
deal
out
minimal
all the
damage to
strength.
anything larger than an insect. Most players will be able to ignore this attack's damage. However, this doesn't mean a crow's attacks are useless. It just means they've got to be clever about how they use them. A well-placed peck can provoke an attack, and if you're able to move out of the way quick enough, the enraged player will end up being forced to lash out whoever just happens to be nearby, and create an opening for the Corvid player to capture an objective, steal some loot, or escape trouble. It might seem like a jank strategy, but really this is the bread and butter of Corvid gameplay, and can lead to massive swings in advantage. The chance to afflict the enraged status effect scales
they
with the user's
specialized in
intelligence
cheese.
stat.
I mean, that's definitely S tier.
Yeah. All's fair in all's fair in the animal arena.
Corvid using the brush bee tactic. Yes, exactly. Yeah, when you troll their when you troll your prey, it's more likely to make
that
mistakes.
the Corvid's intelligence stat is ridiculously
Imagine
high for
using
a non-primate
briefing
build.
as a tactic.
Corvids are tied with parrots
I
for the
definitely
highest
can.
intelligence stat in the entire AnCom faction. And in addition to enabling the goading strike moveset, having high intelligence grants Corvids access to a lot of other powerful techniques too, including the ability to use tools. Tool use is one of the most notoriously powerful abilities in the entire game.
A fucking orangutan driving a golf cart?
By
Goddamn.
using hook-shaped wooden sticks, crows can score kills on grubs that are normally safe from everything except for woodpecker attacks. And given how many expensive niche perks woodpeckers need to spec into in order to perform these sorts of drilling attacks, the ability to bypass all of that investment while still gaining the same rewards is a huge boon to the crows. But high intelligence has far more benefits than just allowing crows to copy the success of hyper-specialized builds. Arguably the most important benefit is team tactics. This is what allows baboons to fight off lions, what allows ants to bring down tarantulas, and what allows wolves to prey upon bison. When crows
if
work
by
together,
prepare
they can
you
capture
mean
territory and control
find
points of
and
interest
get out
that
of
would
tight
otherwise be
spaces
helpless
with
to defend.
tools,
They
yes,
can even rescue each
Corvids
other
can
from what
prepare
would
their own
otherwise be guaranteed lethal attacks.
pretty good.
Using a tactic called mobbing. Mobbing is a strategy most commonly seen in birds, consisting of bombarding a single target with a barrage of both physical and sonic attacks. On their own, these would be easy to shrug off, but when you're getting pecked at and screeched at from all directions at once, it inflicts heavy physical and psychic damage. This is what allows social corvids, like magpies and crows, to successfully chase away predators several times their size. Ravens, on the other hand, tend not to really need the help as they're large enough to handle most opponents one-on-one, but can still team up in order to lock down a good
Never
source
fuck
of
with a
carry.
Raven.
True.
Alternatively, they may even ally themselves with wolf players, leading them to a carcass and letting them do the work fighting off their competition before sharing in the rewards. Anyway, that's a basic overview of
Imagine
the Corvid build.
trifecta
Now let's talk about
that would be human, wolf, raven.
It'd be perfect.
Yep.
But if the Corvids got together with the wolves to take out humans,
Yeah, that could be problematic.
that would be bad. I wouldn't want to see how that war goes.
I mean, we already saw a preview of that with the Australian Emu War.
The emus wrecked them.
The Corvid matchup chart is heavily dependent on how effective their goading strike and mobbing techniques are against a given target. Luckily, because of how high the Corvid's intelligence stat is, the list of targets goading strike works against is quite long. It is best against builds with lower intelligence stats. Things like vultures, things like reptiles, and things like rodents. What's more, this technique even works on one of the Corvid's two primary threats, feline builds. Deadly as
How does it even fall for
they're
that?
also quite reactive and easily aggravated, so goading strike is the perfect tool to redirect their ferocity. This move is admittedly less effective
Literally
against the Corvid's
just
other main
getting
concern,
two cats to
raptors.
fight each other. Amazing.
Yeah, literally use taunt, but on something else. It's crazy. Usable. Okay.
However, thankfully the mobbing technique is quite effective against raptors, so for both of their main threats, the crow players have options. The only builds these techniques aren't that effective against are other high intelligence builds, such as monkeys and parrots. Because of their extremely strong social bonding and top tier intelligence stat, parrots are highly resistant to psychic damage and do not turn on each other easily. In fact, when pestered by a Corvid, they are likely to defend each other fiercely using their own, more powerful beaks and louder shrieks. One-on-one, they're fairly evenly matched, so it tends to just come down to size. But in groups, Corvids tend to have difficulty forcing parrots away from an objective. As for monkeys, their higher HP allows them to more easily ignore the pecking attacks of a crow, and they're used to getting their tails tugged all the time by their own party members, so a crow doing it is unlikely to provoke a punishable response. Crows and parrots have an interesting dynamic. I've said in previous videos that I believe
The
parrots
amount
to be
of
the more
time this
viable
man
build.
puts into figuring
They have
out
higher
which
dexterity.
game to pair with which scene.
It's pretty good. Like them running that Smash Brothers on this is pretty
Yeah.
funny.
With their beaks, their sonic shriek attack is incredibly effective. They're more social and arguably more intelligent even. And yet, of the two most intelligent
Double
bird
parrot
builds,
steal for
there's no
you.
denying that in the city biome, Corvids are much more successful.
Oh!
The reason for this
Corvids.
is that even
You
though
can get
parrots
Corvids
are indeed
to
more
steal for
powerful
you,
on
too.
their own, and are better at using most tools than crows are,
And that's the
crows are
important
better
part.
at using the most important tool, other players. From provoking attacks and redirecting aggression,
Dirty.
to using passing vehicles to deal damage for them and unlock high-value loot, Corvids are the best of the best when it comes to using other build strengths to cover for their own shortcomings.
That crow
And if the
literally
dominance is-
stole food from the cat to give it to the dog. Fucking wild.
And made a friend.
Yep.
Crows are filthy.
any indication, co-opting the strengths of less intelligent builds is one of the strongest strategies you can possibly execute in the game, and it's for this reason that Corvids sit proudly in S tier. Speaking of builds with a high success rate within the city biome, another creature that thrives in cities is the centipede. With their quick, twitchy movement and flat shape, they have no trouble weaving through all
Those
the
things
nooks and
fucking
crannies
terrify
common
me.
in urban environments. This is the
crazy
subject of
build.
my next video, which will be out on YouTube in a month or
Millipedes
so.
I'm fine with. but
However, if you'd like to
centipedes
watch that video
fucking
right now,
terrify.
you can access it a month in advance.
Aren't they like super poisonous too?
Yes, venomous, but yes.
Gotcha. All right, gonna watch this thing Grand Designs gave me. Because we need to
A
find
group
out
of
if
Inuits
dinosaurs are
came to
enough.
Fairbanks, Alaska, led by an old man.
What's
He
good?
carried
Might
a
a
piece of
Vietnamese
frozen
centipedes will
flesh,
kill a kid?
about a
Oh
foot
god!
square. Since his
Can't
group
even
had
see the
skids to
thing.
trade, One of the white men who came to barter with them asked what they planned to do with the piece of flesh. But the old man stepped back in alarm. He said the flesh was a luck giver and that they wouldn't sell it. He said it came from far, far up. And this was the weirdest part. He said it came from a big demon that had killed 2 of their tribe. What the heck happened? Well, more than a year before that, around 1914, these Inuits had been on a long, incredible journey through the Arctic, which took them beyond the frigid waters of Alaska and into somewhere impossible, a warm oasis that was an unknown world. Could it be true? Is there a secret warm oasis in the Arctic beyond Alaska? Is there proof of ancient civilizations buried in the ice? And are there more paranormal mysteries that we can uncover
you were telling me
if we
something
find the
about
right accounts?
what was it?
Join
Aliens?
me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, for a metaphysical show that's out of this world.
I know you mentioned something, I think it was last week. Or Monday.
In 1916, the Ogden Standard Examiner published an article called Deadly
That's what we
Dinosaur
need, Kyle.
Dining Near the North Pole. But the most amazing
We need to
part
find
was
the
that
land
this
of the
encounter
giant
wasn't just
beasts.
a local fairy tale. It wasn't just an Alaskan legend. There was physical proof the men brought back after seeing this fearsome beast. Now check this out. Around 1914, about 50 Inuits were living on Thetis Island in the extreme far north of Alaska. 12 of the men went on a fishing expedition one day that carried them over the Arctic Ocean. But there was a sudden breaking up of the ice, and a huge ice floe carried them out to sea. All they had with them were some fish and a fire-making machine.
And they came back and they all knew Kung
the floe
Fu.
drifted for weeks, and they thought they were lost for good until finally they saw land. They miraculously made it to shore and started finding some signs of musk ox, Arctic foxes, and reindeer. These guys were hunters, so they were able to use their weapons to keep themselves alive and finally wander further inland. As they hiked around, they realized the snow was becoming softer and finally disappearing entirely on a plateau of high flat land. And to get there, they had to go through a narrow pass that had a stream of warm water. Pretty strange for the north. Now hang on, how was there warm water in the Arctic? Clouds of steam were coming from a lake in the middle of some marshy land, and there were tons of animals there to hunt. They finally thought they were safe, so everyone was finally able to get some
Uphill
sleep.
both ways, Moon.
But not for long. Just then, the group's leader woke up hearing a whining noise, so he peered over the rocks where they'd camped. He saw a monster, 50 feet long with a huge head, a long neck, and a long tail. Its hind legs were large and powerful, and its front ones were short. What does that sound like? The group had already thought the warm water was suspicious, and now they were sure the gods had blessed them with comfort and then cursed them with the false vision. 2 of the group went up to the monster, thinking that it was just a vision that would vanish.
I mean, with good
but
reason,
it eyed
Kyle.
them immediately and
Where's your
charged.
OP?
A tremendous alligator-like
Oh.
tail knocked them down, then it hopped up to the pair of Inuits and devoured them. The group thought all of this could still be a false vision, because who'd believe a friggin' dinosaur was running around on these lands? They thought that if they left where
Is
they
that
didn't
even
belong, their
possible?
men would somehow return to them. But back out in that snowy tundra they came from, they're
AnCom, does our atmosphere even
Sorry.
support dinosaurs?
I mean, smaller ones, sure, but like, you know, our atmosphere can support a fucking elephant, so anything roughly the size of an elephant could still technically be supported, assuming they had enough surface area in their lungs to you know, be good with the relatively lower oxygen levels that we have today.
Yeah, because there was more oxygen like way, way back when dinosaurs were around, as opposed to
Yeah,
now.
like the main reason things could
Hyperfauna.
get bigger back in the day was the higher oxygen content meant they didn't need as much surface area in order to fully oxygenate their blood.
there just wasn't much
Huh.
food. So they had to go back to the beast's lair, and indeed, their 2 men were frickin' dead. The creature wasn't in sight anymore, but there were many more 3-toed tracks in every direction, plus an entire animal graveyard, so they knew there were more of these demons roaming around. During a hunt, they came across
Nephilim
the dead
confirmed.
body of one of them and cut a huge section of skin and flesh to take as proof of their experience. when they saw one more creature take down an entire muskox by rushing it, bowling it over with its tail, and eating it, Inuits had seen enough. They voted to go back to the ice and snow and take no more chances in the domain of the demon.
That would be the
It was
move.
pretty much a miracle they'd made it to this land with plenty of food in the first place, but that wasn't their only miracle. They got back on an ice floe and prayed to the god of fate to blow them back to Thetis Island. Amazingly, after many
Gods and
weeks,
demons,
they
we
indeed
got it.
returned with the flesh for proof and told everyone their story.
How'd they even get the flesh?
That's amazing if it's true, but how could it be? The American
too busy
Museum of
running from
Natural
it.
History at the time said that the creature sounded like a dinosaur, but it was of course impossible for dinosaurs to be existing on Earth now. But I mean, to me, it sure sounded like a T-Rex or something like that. Some said at the time that the Inuit people had just never seen a kangaroo before, but give me a break.
Carnivorous
a kangaroo
kangaroo
is a
taking
lot
out an
smaller than
ox.
how that thing was described, and I'm pretty sure there are no Arctic kangaroos, never mind ones who are able to devour men in a couple
That's
bites.
what I would think it would look
Moreover,
like.
it would be pretty hard to mistake a weird two-toed kangaroo track for huge three-toed tracks. These were huntsmen. I mean, these guys know their tracks. So what's the most plausible explanation? That they were too stupid to describe what they saw accurately, or that they stumbled upon something
Demonic
amazing?
Easter bunny.
Considering the clouds of steam that the men saw, it seems like there were hot springs or thermal vents that heated the area somehow. But what if the real explanation were even more metaphysical than that? The tale of the Great Demon was told all over northern Alaska after this, and Inuit mothers warned their children not to go out on solid ice, or else they'd be carried to the land of the Great Demon. The children started thinking this demon was a ghost that could somehow travel everywhere. So I guess the tale evolved over time, but maybe they were open to the idea of spirits because there already were some in the area. Besides this encounter, I need to share some local folklore and proof of ancient civilizations in Alaska and Canada that give us a bigger picture that I honestly didn't expect.
Oh, we get to
Then
blame
you
Canada
decide
for this.
whether the barren wasteland is as
Oh,
dead
obviously.
as they think it is.
That's why Canadians are so vicious.
Okay,
They're out
let's
there
see
fighting
what authority
dinosaurs.
figures and explorers were saying about the cold regions of the North, because I wanted to know. In the 1890s and early 1900s, Lieutenant Robert Peary made expeditions to Greenland and was one of the first Arctic explorers to
more?
study Inuit survival techniques. He even made it to the North Pole. Well, Peary gave a talk that was recorded in a newspaper in 1893. He said, quote, "Nature is full of freaks, and she seems particularly lavish of their display in these far northern regions. On one of our numerous coast expeditions, we visited Statue Cliff, a massive cliffs that have been so curiously carved with figures, such exact images of men and animals, that even the unimaginative natives have called them the Statue Cliffs." Now, yeah, people weren't always nice writing about other cultures in the 1800s, but he continued. "Near them is the Evil Mountain. I was unable to learn why it was so called, as no native ever ventures nearer than a mile of it. Another curious freak is the
Interesting.
Stone Face. This is a cliff so formed as to be an exact image of a human face with a long beard reaching down to
all
the
look
sea.
angry.
The face is looking northward over a vast expanse of Arctic seas of eternal ice and may well be termed the Greenland Sphinx." Okay, so this is nuts, so let's recap.
Greenland
Exact and
Sphinx.
realistic carvings of men and animals were made in the far north, when local native artwork was not made in a realistic style at all. So how did it all get there? Was it buried in the ice for a long time and made by earlier humans and another civilization? If these statue cliffs weren't weird enough, right near them was a place the natives called Evil Mountain. Why did no native ever go within a mile of it? And how about the Greenland Sphinx, which looks just like a human face? I mean, I really wish that there were photos of that. Why didn't this
You know
dude
what
take
else
any
looks
photos?
just like a
NPR
human face? A particular mountain on Mars.
The pareidolia.
Yeah.
Yep, pretty much. But there's no photos, so like Pixar didn't happen.
Yeah. And like also something he said about this was like he gave two options about those native hunters and what they saw, and one was they're too stupid, and the other is these are experienced hunters who know what they saw. The third is, and I think this is the much more plausible explanation, hunters like to make shit up to make things interesting. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
There we go.
Like it doesn't need to be any more interesting than that. Like, yeah, it's a good story. Great. Doesn't mean there's any fucking truth to it. They could have just been making shit up because they wanted it to sound cool.
I mean, the story doesn't check out in general because, like, how do they get the meat from the animals? So unless they killed the animal, which they could have brought back the whole thing or more of it or bones or something, kind of seems like they were full of it.
Like, this is literally just like Klingon philosophy, right? Boast about your exploits and, take some artistic license if you want to make it sound cool.
There we go.
Reported in 2014 that an ancient landscape was found under 2 miles of ice in Greenland with organic soil frozen to the bottom of the ice sheet. When scientists studied samples, they found millions of traces of a certain isotope that proved the land had once been exposed to the atmosphere. They thought they'd be looking for a needle in the haystack, but the millions of traces proved that Greenland was once green. In fact, it probably looked like the green Alaskan tundra before it was covered by the second largest body of ice on Earth. Okay, so what does this tell us? In the past, Greenland was inhabited by large groups of people who would have lived and built things there. Today, there are under 57,000 people living there, and 3/4 of Greenland is covered by the only permanent
Why
ice
you gotta
sheet
be like
outside
that,
of
Moon?
Antarctica.
That's very aggressive.
But at different points in time, continents have shifted and land masses have sunk to the ocean floor, risen up, been buried by sand and snow and ice, and gone through all kinds of things. So underneath snow-covered mountains and ice shelves, it's pretty likely we'd find evidence of the cultures that once lived there. Maybe the statue cliffs are one example. Maybe the Evil Mountain is as well. But that makes me wonder, what other data about these ancient civilizations would be learned if we studied samples or even DNA more thoroughly or from deeper down?
I mean,
now check this out.
Kyle's not wrong.
During the height of the ancient
a
Greek and
Stefan
Roman
machine
empires,
would be
thousands
very
of years
useful
ago,
for me.
lead emissions drifted from Europe and settled into Greenland's ice almost 3,000 miles away.
I agree.
How do we know? The lead is present
I
in ice
need to
samples
respec a
from
point
the
or two
time
into
of the
Chris.
Iron Age through the Middle Ages and beyond. But what's even more amazing is that dips in the
Straight up
presence of lead
Stefan or
appeared
Cal
during the
mention.
times
Let's
of
go.
plagues
That's a
and
great
wars.
reference.
There's no production of
Yup.
lead, so no lead emissions drifting into the ice. So this is where it gets interesting. Can this method of sample studies be used to find evidence of ancient civilizations all over the world as well? What if we found really old ice and were able to drill into that and look at what was there? Higher levels of certain materials and lower levels of others would give us clues about what the Earth was like during those times. Never mind the DNA that's there and what people were potentially doing, of course. I mean, we all know they're digging down in Antarctica as well. And that idea really isn't hypothetical. Today, the Ice Cube neutrino detector at the South Pole Station extends to a depth of about 2,500 meters in the
Serious?
Antarctic ice and looks for
Yep.
these very tiny particles.
It's
called
fucking
neutrinos.
massive.
But what other information is it gathering that most of us wouldn't even know to look for? Would the data tell us anything else if we were able to just ask the right questions and look for it? I bet we'd find something pretty amazing. Some of you may be asking, well, Rob, what do you think? Well,
find
the Arctic
amazing
region
stuff all the time.
was supposed to
We
be
really
a
do.
desolate tundra, super
More and
difficult to
more
inhabit.
as time goes
But I
by.
found evidence of a warm oasis, ancient civilizations, and bizarre creatures. I mean, come on, a freaking dinosaur in the Arctic? Clearly there's more to our human history and even to the Earth than we think. You know, guys, at this point, I believe there really was an oasis up there heated by thermal vents, honestly. Or maybe it was a heck of a lot weirder, and the Inuits went through a portal to the ancient past, or they were supernaturally guided there, or all three. Because how did they even get there alive and then make it all the way home safely on an ice floe? I mean, think of the chances of that. Did anyone else ever find those strange beasts before them, or find the land and even settle there? If you're a film buff like I am, you may have seen the 1974 movie called The Island at the Top of the World that had a lot of parallels with history. It was set in 1907 when the height of the Arctic exploration really happened.
Yes,
It tells
AnCom
the
was the
story
true
of a
proof
rich
of
man
evolution
funding
all
an Arctic
along.
expedition to find his son who'd made friends with the local natives and then gone missing. Where had he gone? Hidden beneath a large cloud was an island guarded by evil spirits where, according to the natives, the whales go to die. The movie name-dropped real Arctic explorers like Peary, who I mentioned earlier. And in the Arctic, they found a volcanic island.
Oh,
heated by
okay.
thermal
I
springs
misunderstood
and heat
your
rising
comment,
through fissures
Kyle.
in the ground.
You said
Sounds
AnCom
familiar,
is that
like
dibble
this real
dude
story from the
in that
newspaper in
debate.
1893, right?
Then you said,
If
but
you
if you
watch the
went through
fictional
the
movie,
Stefan
there was
machine
a
on Family
full
Matters
race of
as
Viking
like
descendants
I
living
took
up
that
there,
as a
separated from the
hypothetical,
rest of
not
the
as
world.
a
And sea beasts like killer
as
whales
a buff
guarded
I
the
already
waters
had.
around the area.
So thank
now,
you.
this movie was based on a 1961 fiction book called The Lost Ones, but books and movies tend to draw on real ancient history, so they may have included more true details in this movie than most people knew about. In this account I've told today, the stories came from the oral traditions of the Inuit. Maybe it's just me, but I found in my research that the native oral traditions can be more trustworthy even than our own. This topic of fantastic lands and strange places was popular for fiction at the time, of course, but the question is why? I personally think it's because the idea hits something deeper inside us all, something we know is real. If I go to the north, I'll be looking for the warm oasis and hope I don't get eaten by the great demon. Now, speaking of strange creatures, I haven't even gotten into the terrifying cryptids of the north that have been found in Alaska, Canada, and Greenland.
Of course,
to
Canada.
start, you can check out my other episodes on Alaska,
course,
where my
Canada.
co-host John Vivanco and I talked about UFOs, Bigfoot, the Alaskan Dark
I mean,
Pyramid,
just the far north
missing
in
people,
general, you know.
Admiral Byrd's Arctic
Russia,
and Antarctic
Canada,
expeditions,
Alaska,
and John's remote viewing
Greenland.
data on these topics. And I found even more since then, so stay tuned for an episode all about the Yeti and the abominable snowman, and leave me a comment if there are other topics you're hoping I cover. So I want to give a huge shout out to our subscribers over at themetaphysical.tv who let us keep making this content. We couldn't do this without you. If you want to see what they're getting, like exclusive episodes and director cuts and all of that, you can subscribe to the Mystery Junkie tier or higher. We've also got Metaphysical Coffee if you want your mornings to be interstellar. And if you want, you can get metaphysical merch that I designed, like this Bigfoot sweatshirt. Thank you guys so much for your support and all of your awesome comments, and for watching, of course. And remember to like and subscribe. And with that, I hope you thought this episode was out of this world.
The 6-7 shit is just. VP, why are you trying to give us psychic damage?
Oh, it's mostly just Kyle. Everyone else is collateral.
This video was made in partnership with CuriosityStream.
Sometimes you gotta throw a grenade to be effective. Jeez.
Humans are the current #1 build in the meta, but they haven't always reigned supreme. In fact, at first they were one of the least powerful builds in the meta, and it took several buffs, refinements, and tweaks before the human became even remotely threatening within its home server of Africa. So today, we're going to break down all the different variations of the human build throughout the history of Outside and discuss their unique traits, stats, and abilities, with the hope of demonstrating why some of these skill tree choices worked, while others couldn't compete. The first players to unlock the human class were a group of African primate mains that switched from the knuckle-walking quadrupedal build to a bipedal one. It's important to note that at this point, they hadn't sacrificed their arboreal mobility perks yet, and relied heavily on their ability to climb to escape danger.
So, AnCom, why didn't we focus more on like human evolution over animals? Because it's a lot easier to like trace back humans for people that don't understand animals very well.
Yeah, that's fair. I just kind of went where the conversation led, but it's one of those things where I need to do more research into like the full history of, you know, going back as far as I can in terms of ancient hominids to get like a more complete view of it before I'm really confident about talking about that.
Fair enough. Because I hit him like the the day you got pinned, I was hitting him on the idea that the DNA of other hominid species exists with us. And how does he explain it?
In prep for that discussion, I was watching a fairly recent Gutsit Gibbon video where she was going over the fact that most other apes have 48 chromosomes. Humans have 46. In fact, even like chimps and bonobos have 48. So at some point between the common ancestor of chimps and humans, and now there was a fusion event between chromosomes in the genome that got us from 48 down to 46. And she was going over all of the evidence of the fact that chromosome 2 in humans shows the exact evidence that we would expect of such a fusion event when compared to the two chromosomes in chimps and bonobos that we hypothesize were the ones that fused by the time it got to humans. So you can actually see pretty clearly if you take the two chromosomes in chimps and you put them end to end such they like where the telomeres are on the ends of those two chromosomes, it gives you like they just connect up. It's basically the same fucking gene sequence. It's actually kind of wild.
And like, honestly, with that being the case, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that we end up where we are now, given enough time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and like the thing I was trying to get across to him was this idea that like he says he accepts microevolution, so he accepts adaptation and doesn't carry that idea forward to say if you get enough adaptations over a long enough period of time, you are going to have a cumulative effect that is a lot of changes, which then incurs speciation. You become a different species, and like you break off and into different genuses and all that shit. Yeah, it takes a long time. On the short end, several millennia, on the long end, millions of years. It's something that is hard to observe in real time, but like the fossil and genetic evidence that we have is pretty convincing to most evolutionary biologists, if not all, to say that yeah, the connection is clearly there, and as we get more and more fossil evidence and we see these transitions in more and more detail, the evidence just keeps piling up that says, yeah, the species that are around today are are long-term cumulative adaptations of species that existed millions of years ago.
Makes sense.
And one of the annoying things is, I think Zephyr had brought up an animal, like a raccoon or something, and Joe's rebuttal was, did it become something that's not a raccoon? And I'm like, that's not how evolution works. You can't evolve out of a clade. We are still monkeys. We are still primates. We are still apes. We are still animals. Like, you never become something other than you already were. You just add on to that, right? So in a million years, we will be humans plus something. And for all we know, we may look very different from humans, but the definition of a clade is a common ancestor and all of its descendants. So we will never stop being humans. A raccoon will never evolve out of being a raccoon. It just will evolve into something else that is a raccoon and then something.
Well, that's why they use the Pachycetus into a whale thing. It's like, oh, how does a wolf become a whale? But it's still a mammal.
And Pachycetus and Ambulocetus and on and on and on. And at every level, you see fewer elements of the former and more elements of the final product. So over time, you see less Pachycetus, less, land mammal, and more you see aquatic mammal. And like at every stage, you see those developments. So, either, God gave us this really, really long fossil record of unconnected animals that look like they're connected for no reason, or evolution happened. And like, even if a God exists, like, whatever, I don't even care so much about that in this discussion. It's just that the evidence for the evolutionary process is so overwhelming that if a God exists, there's no way it didn't, like, use or at least allow evolution to occur. Because the evidence that it occurred is that convincing. It's that overwhelming.
If only we could have got there.
Yeah. I only had an hour and a half, and it was late.
It's never going to be enough time, I promise.
No, but, it may not be enough time in one conversation, but, maybe I can wear them down. We'll see.
Over time, let's go. To the humans.
Just like evolution.
The top tiers at the time were all large terrestrial mammal builds, far too
I will evolve Joe.
challenge them. So their
I
only
will be
option
the
was-
selective pressure that evolves Joe into an evolution acceptor.
See if we can make them communist.
That's a little farther down the line. I'm still struggling with you on that one, but maybe we'll get there.
I'm hard-headed, don't worry.
So is he.
Avoid them.
Possibly harder
It
than
might
you.
seem counterintuitive to switch to a bipedal build when your playstyle is centered around the arboreal zone, but the reason this was so crucial was because it freed up their hands to be able to carry items back to their tree. This was the first step towards refining the cooperative, loot-sharing playstyle that have made humans so dominant in the current meta. Now, you might be surprised to learn that the devs have nerfed humans in the past. The tree-dwelling strategy was seen as a cheap way to avoid dealing with other players, and so the devs decided to reduce the number and size of trees in the Africa server. This forced humans to ditch their arboreal strategy and spec into ground-based abilities. And for a while, humans got absolutely bodied by other players. Even with the ability to use items and create tools, the other builds in the region, like saber-tooths and giant hyenas, were far too strong for humans to deal with. They had to rely solely on the thieving skill to get by, but this disadvantage was slightly mitigated by their newfound ability to crack bone using tools, letting them scavenge for marrow after big cats had finished with the kill. Once humanity had scraped together enough evolution points by scavenging, they finally got to level up some of their stats and give themselves the ability to survive by hunting rather than scavenging. They spec'd into longer legs and less body hair, allowing them to finally unlock one of the human's most powerful signature abilities, sweating. Sweating allows the player to recharge their stamina even while moving, whereas other builds are forced to stop and use the pant ability to recharge stamina. They could justify putting all of their evolution points into mobility rather than power, because by this point they'd also leveled up their crafting enough to make spears, the staple best in slot two-handed weapon until the invention of gunpowder. A sustainable source of meat is worth a lot more XP than fruit or scavenged marrow. So much so that this let humans finally start leveling up their intelligence to a truly staggering level, promoting both cooperation and innovation. But once again, nerfs were on the way. Just before the Ice Age balance patch hit, a faction of the human player base migrated servers, establishing themselves in the Europe server. Most of the others stayed in Africa. The Ice Age patch
Europe
hit,
server,
and it led to two very different changes in the two servers that the humans were playing on. In Europe, as you probably expect, the overworld temperature dropped and ice damage became a threat. The humans, as well as most of the other top players there, spec'd into bulkier builds that could survive the cold better. In short, the update didn't really affect them too badly. This group became known as the Neanderthal faction. The humans that remained in Africa, now known as the Sapiens faction, faced a much worse update. Ironically, during the Ice Age, Africa got hotter and drier. The large herbivores humans had such a good matchup against all left, and the human player base in Africa was reduced to the brink of extinction, with player counts below 10,000. They survived by leveling up their fishing skill, scavenging for shellfish and other low XP sources, as they too made their escape from Africa. When they finally escaped Africa, they were finally back in a server that they could thrive in, but they had competition. Neanderthals had the highest stats of any human build in history. They had bigger brains, more girthy bodies, stronger muscles, just undeniably a more viable build compared to Sapiens. So by this point, I'm guessing you're wondering, well, if Neanderthals were more powerful, why is it that eventually the Neanderthals lost the faction war to the Sapiens? It turns out that their physical superiority was actually their downfall. Neanderthals and Sapiens had a very different hunting strategy when it comes to taking down large herbivores. Neanderthals had the strength to defeat them with melee combat, and had the defense and HP to be able to take a hit or two, even from some of the Ice Age's strongest herbivores.
Fraggle.
They were also fast enough to be able to close the distance between themselves and their targets. This all sounds awesome, but there's one key detail in this plan that you might have noticed. Since Neanderthals were fit enough to take on these herbivores face to face, they didn't have to invent ranged weapons. Sapiens, on the other hand, would get one shot if they tried to take on behemoths like mammoths or woolly rhinos in close combat. Thankfully, even though their brains weren't as big as Neanderthals, it was still more than enough for them to be able to use the aforementioned crafting skill to create the first ranged weapon, the atlatl. Atlatls are a relatively simple yet effective item that allows the user to launch spears over twice as far. This was critical for the survival of Sapiens, as it allowed them to match the DPS of the Neanderthal, but also stay out of range of a potentially devastating counterattack. Sapiens also tended to have bigger party sizes.
The original Florida Man.
Neanderthals were less social and tended to stick to small, tight-knit groups, while Sapiens formed much larger communities that could control much larger territories. Eventually, even though Neanderthals were the better fighters, they were the ones failing to find enough XP to survive. And this is where their physical might became a huge detriment. The bigger you are, the more energy you need to survive. And so the Neanderthals' strong, powerful bodies eventually became unsustainable. Most of them were defeated in combat or starved, although a few did end up actually switching factions and joining with the Sapiens. But finally, after defeating their most dangerous opponent, humans were free to dominate the game as the new top tiers. They mastered several key advanced techniques such as agriculture, archery, and sailing, allowing them to push the meta far past what other builds ever thought possible. You'd think that they would all work together to rule the game, but unfortunately many of them ended up engaging in PvP with each other. It kinda makes sense given that other players are hardly even a challenge, but nonetheless, infighting is their biggest weakness right now. Anyways, hopefully that gives you a better background on the history of the game's most overpowered build.
That was a solid evolution video.
I bet many of you noticed the incredible footage of ancient hominids that I used in this video. This footage is from a brand new documentary called Out of the Cradle, which was animated by Square Enix, the masterminds behind the Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest video games. It's available right now on CuriosityStream, a streaming service that has over 2,400 titles, including many of my personal all-time favorites, like Walking with Dinosaurs, Ice Age Giants, and of course, Out of the Cradle. The subscription is only $2.99 a month, but if you go to curiositystream.com/TierZoo right now and use the promo code TierZoo, you can get a whole month for free. So please, go check out Out of the Cradle. I can genuinely say that it's got some of the best animation of any prehistoric documentary I've seen. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching.
I have a Nebula sub if you ever want to watch that on stream.
Until next.
Appreciate it. So I got into an argument yesterday with Jim Bob, and he's like, "Oh, you believe in evolution?" I'm like, "Of course." He's like, "Tell me George Floyd was an ape," and I'm like, "We're all apes."
Every single one of them.
You're not going to answer the question. Just say it. No, why would I say that? Why do you want me to say that?
I said we're all apes. All of the we're all portion includes George Floyd as well as every other human on the planet. I did say it. Fuck off.
That's actually what I said to him. I was like, I did say it in the sense that we are all apes. I did say that. I'm just not going to single out one person. But yeah, he really wanted that happening. What is
unsurprising.
Yeah. More dinosaurs.
For as long as we have been aware of their existence, people all over the world have displayed an intense fascination with dinosaurs. Discoveries of their fossilized remains likely help inspire the legend of the dragon, the monstrous, sometimes winged reptile which features in traditional folklore from China to Mexico. The wild popularity of the Jurassic Park franchise demonstrates our enduring interest in these kings of the Mesozoic, and our deep, primitive gratitude that they no longer walk the earth. And many young boys and girls go through a dinosaur phase, characterized by an all-consuming obsession with these primordial monsters.
Doubtful.
The academic community in North America and Europe went through its own dino phase in the mid to late 19th century, after English paleontologist Sir Richard Owen, in 1942, first used the Greco-Latin compound word Dinosaurus, or terrible lizard, as a denotation for the ancient reptiles whose petrified skeletons were being unearthed in England, Holland, and Germany.
Looks like a Scooby-Doo
Victorian dinosaur mania veritably exploded a decade later, when Owen commissioned British sculptor Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins with creating life-size sculptures of 33 dinosaurs, which were based upon Owen's interpretations of the handful of fossils that had been unearthed at that time. The sculptures were completed in 1854, and were unveiled with great pomp and ceremony during the grand opening of a prehistoric-themed park constructed outside the Crystal Palace. The Crystal Palace being a portable glass and iron building, which had housed London's great exhibition, the First World Fair, back in 1851. Catalyzed by the popularity of the Crystal Palace dinosaurs, museums across Great Britain and the United States raced to populate their display rooms with the largest and most impressive dinosaur skeletons money could buy, which they purchased from independent and fiercely competitive paleontologists.
The paleontology
Hand in hand
boom.
with the dinomania of Western academia came fictional tales of lost worlds, inhabited by the primeval monsters that had inflamed Victorian imagination.
And that's where Platypus comes from.
In 1864, French novelist Jules Verne published Journey to the Center of the Earth, a French literary classic in which an eccentric German scientist and his nephew discover a subterranean ocean deep beneath Iceland, teeming with aquatic dinosaurs. In 1888, Canadian writer James DeMille's fantasy romance, a strange manuscript found in a copper cylinder, was published posthumously in serial format in Harper's Weekly magazine, telling the story of a thermally heated, semi-tropical oasis in Antarctica, where dinosaurs roam. In 1898, English novelist C.J. Cutcliffe Hine published The Lizard, a short story about an English gentleman who discovered and battled a carnivorous dinosaur in a cave near the English village of Kettlewell. The following year, American writer Warden Allen Curtis's science fiction short story, The Monster of Lake Lametri, was published in the September issue of Pearson's magazine. Curtis's piece is written as the lost diary of a physician who discovered a living plesiosaur in a mountain lake in Wyoming, into the skull of which he transplanted the brain of his dying teenage companion. And in 1912, British author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle published his science fiction novel The Lost World, in which an ambitious young reporter accompanies an indomitable professor on an expedition to a remote stretch of South American jungle, which supports a robust population of pterodactyls.
What is it I haven't seen that you now need to play?
Do you really think this could be an undiscovered Pokemon?
Well, I've never seen a fossil quite like the one you found, Red. You might have discovered what could be a brand new Pokemon.
Really?
Well, there's only one way to find out.
Wow, it really is a brand new Pokemon.
It seems you made quite the discovery, Red.
Oh, what's its name? What do we call it?
Well, let's listen closely, because I believe we're about to find out.
Oh, God, no. Is that really its name?
I don't know. This is unprecedented.
It's a racist Pokemon.
Come on, it's been fossilized for thousands of years. You couldn't have heard the word before. That just has to be its name.
Oh, my God. What do we do now?
I don't know. This is a very unprecedented circumstance.
Can we just release it back into the wild and pretend we had no part in this?
I mean, it's going to come back to us eventually. There's no getting behind that.
Stop saying that!
Listen, well, this is our problem now. We brought this thing back to life. Nobody else.
Well, hey, that's a good point. You know, no one knows this thing exists right now, right? So.
What are you getting at?
I mean, if to the rest of the world this thing's already dead.
You want to euthanize it?
I'm just laying out options.
We just brought it back and you want to kill it?
Well, clearly they had a reason to drive it to extinction.
No, Red, we're not going to kill it. Besides, it stands to reason that his existence predates the way that we use the word today. It might actually lead back to him. It might have had a completely different meaning than it does now. That's a discovery in itself.
Is that what you want to be? That it's just a word, Professor?
No, I'm just saying, you know, maybe we're looking at this all wrong.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, look at it. It's very cute and marketable. Yeah, this could still be a very profitable discovery.
How would that work?
I mean, if you get past the name thing, you sell us a plushie, you go crazy.
Oh, yeah, if you get past the name thing. I mean, how would you even buy one?
Well, at the store.
Yeah, but you go to the store, you're not asking for Pikachu, you're asking for what? Like, how do you describe what you want to buy?
Maybe we're mishearing him. Yeah, maybe it's like an auditory illusion thing, like it's a brainstorm green needle. Maybe it just depends how you hear it. Maybe...
Professor,
yes, Red.
You're saying it.
I know.
I just don't know. Is it morally right to let this thing exist, or is it morally right never to tell anyone about it?
Well, there is one more option.
Which is?
Just undo it.
That was an option the whole time?
Well, yeah.
Why didn't you lead with that?
Well, it's experimental. I don't know what's going to happen.
What do you mean you don't know? You built the thing.
Have you seen my laboratory? There are gizmos and buttons fucking everywhere. I haven't pressed all of them. I don't know what they do.
Well, what could it do?
Well, theoretically, turn it back into a fossil, but I don't know if it's going to work or not. I've never done it.
That sounds kind of horrible. Maybe we shouldn't do that.
I'm sorry, you said you wanted to euthanize him a second ago.
Yeah, humanely. I didn't want to Han Solo the guy.
All right, fine. We could just go over our options and...
Okay, that was a completely different
story. All right, I'm doing it. Fire time, that works.
Who's that Pokemon?
I don't know this one. Any of them, I don't know.
While dinosaur mania took Victorian culture by storm, a contemporaneous but unrelated
That has no
furor
business
gripped
being
the
that
Western
funny.
mercantile world. As a consequence of the Industrial Revolution and the political upheavals that characterized the Age of Revolution, a wealthy upper-middle class composed of industrialists, doctors, lawyers, bankers, military officers, and other white-collar professionals grew throughout the 19th century. Many members of this burgeoning social strata flaunted their new wealth and standing by furnishing their drawing rooms with pianos,
What a
or
Joe
pianofortes
post.
as they were known at the time, luxuries which
Oh,
were
I'm
once
scared.
affordable only to the aristocracy. It became fashionable for middle-class women and girls to study piano performance, an avocation redolent of high status and good breeding.
Dragon
And soon
Ball
pianos were also
P?
making their way into the
Oh,
bedrooms
okay.
of middle-class
DBZ
ladies throughout the
parody.
Western world. The 52 white keys adorning every
way to
piano in
piss
the
off
Victorian
white guys.
era were covered with veneers of ivory, and in order to supply that ivory, a brisk trade in elephant tusks flourished
Could be
in
worse.
West and
Could have
East
been a
Africa.
Warhammer.
White guys would love that.
The rising demand for ivory was concurrent with a decreased demand for fur, as men throughout the Western world began to prefer silk top hats to the beaver felt headgear affected by their fathers and grandfathers. Some far-sighted fur traders throughout North America, Alaska, and Siberia, eager to adapt to the changes affecting the Victorian market, began to purchase the tusks of woolly mammoths from the natives who had once brought them furs, those ancient ivory appendages being surprisingly common in the North Country, ensconced in the ever-eroding clay of riverbanks across the subarctic. Throughout the course of their boreal wanderings, many of the ivory prospectors who hunted for these antediluvian relics came across partially preserved mammoth carcasses mummified by the permafrost.
That's dope.
In 1806, for example, zoologist M.F. Adams of the Russian Academy of Sciences learned that the body of a frozen mammoth had been discovered by Yakutian hunters on the banks of the Lena River in Siberia, with one eye still in its socket and its brain still in its skull. Despite that much of the mammoth's flesh was subsequently devoured by wild wolves and hungry Yakutian sled dogs, Adams managed to secure a portion of the animal's
dogs
hide,
ate it.
which was so heavy that 10 strong men were needed to drag it to their boat on the riverbank. In 1848, a Russian Orthodox missionary named Kitrovo allegedly discovered the frozen body of a mammoth on the banks of the Kolyma River in northeastern Siberia, with food still in its stomach and twigs still in its mouth. And in 1898, a prospector named Angus Graham reputedly came across the remains of a mammoth encased in ice somewhere in Yukon Territory, which disintegrated when it was exposed to the air. In the late 1800s, prospectors, fur traders, and ivory hunters began returning from the wilderness of northern Canada and Alaska with tales of living mammoths.
See these liars.
In the May 5th, 1889 issue of the
You were
Philadelphia Press, for example, a fur trader named Cola F. Fowler described his 1887 purchase of what appeared to be a fresh mammoth tusk from a native chief. When questioned, the chief informed him that he and his band had encountered a small mammoth herd north of Nome, Alaska, and that some of his hunters killed an old bull and a cow with their large caliber muskets. The March 4th, 1893
kill them
issue
if
of
you
the
find
Sitka-based newspaper The Alaska
Put it in a
contained
zoo.
an article describing a Talton hunter's recent brush with a woolly mammoth in the valley of the Stikine River in northwest British Columbia. And an article in the October 1899 issue of McClure's magazine told a fantastic tale, which was later proven to be a hoax, regarding a successful
course.
mammoth hunt in the early 1890s in the Alaskan wilderness. On April 15, 1908, an incredible article entitled Le Monstre de Partridge Creek, or The Monster of Partridge Creek, appeared in the French popular science magazine Je sais tout. Later that year, an English translation of the same piece appeared in the July 1908 edition of the Strand magazine, a British publication which printed both factual articles and fictional stories. As a literary phenomenon, The Monster of Partridge Creek was the perfect marriage of the two different genres of literature above described, namely fictional tales of living dinosaurs and ostensibly non-fictional accounts of prehistoric monsters in the North Country. Specifically, the piece describes an alleged encounter with a dinosaur in Canada's Yukon Territory. The Monster of Partridge Creek was written by a Frenchman named
so
Georges
much
Dupuy,
easier to grift
whom
back
Wikipedia
then.
identifies as 50-year-old Dr. Georges-Marie Dupuy, a hard-headed Parisian physician and anatomical illustrator, respected in the medical community for his contributions to the field of combat surgery. In fact, the author of the piece was almost certainly the doctor's contemporaneous namesake and fellow Parisian, a 34-year-old journalist, writer, and translator who regularly contributed to the French sporting magazine L'Auto. In addition to writing articles on boxers, sprinters, and other athletes for the aforementioned publication,
way too much information.
Georges Dupuy wrote at least one other short story for Je sais tout, which is set in Canada's Yukon Territory. Dupuy was a stampeder who had participated in the Klondike Gold Rush of
I've never even
1897.
heard of being a stampeder. What
In a
is
saloon in Dawson City, the heart of Klondike country, he became acquainted with fellow writer Jack London,
think it's
future
like,
author of the American literary classics White
basically
Fang and
when
The Call
there's
of the
gold
Wild.
discovered somewhere, the people who stampede to the location to like put down claims based on the context of what he said. He said a stampeder, and then he followed it up about a gold rush. So purely educated guess based on context.
Fair enough. Yeah, the only, like I see immediately the gold rush when it's brought up. It's odd.
Like London,
Never heard that
Dupuy
term
spent much
before.
of his
Well,
time
not
in
used in
Dawson,
that way.
plying old sourdoughs for
Yeah,
tales
same.
of their backcountry adventures. Dupuy made several trips from Paris to Yukon and Alaska in the decade following his prospecting days. On one such foray, which he undertook as
Kyle's
a
addressing you
correspondent
in the
for
chat,
L'Auto,
AnCom.
he traveled to Nome, Alaska, to report on the condition of the Bering Strait sea ice, over which some quixotic industrialists hope to build a highway, the most difficult stretch of a hypothetical thoroughfare connecting New York with Moscow. Just before twilight,
So
he
it's
reported, some 2 miles or
basically
less.
hypothermic psychosis. Essentially, what is happening is your body is trying to create so much heat as you are cooling down that your brain thinks it's overheating. It's a weird, weird paradoxical behavior, because as your body is cooling down, your brain is like, create all the heat, and then the overheating part of your brain kicks in. Yeah, it's wild.
There you go, Kyle.
Less distant.
And
We
that
could
is
see the
crazy.
little blue waves
You
out
would
there
think
in
you
the
would just
Bering
stop
Sea.
yourself from doing
Not
it.
once did it freeze more than 5 miles out at Nome, but there are periods when the strait freezes, unquote. In 1904, Jack London hired Dupuy to translate his short story anthology, The Faith of Men and Other Stories, into French. In a letter to his friend and publisher, George Platt Brett Sr., in which he attempted to convince Brett that Dupuy was the man for the job, London wrote, quote, Mr. Georges Dupuy is a Frenchman, an artist, a journalist, and a man who knows Alaska better than I do. He has lived the life. I call him an artist, and by the word I mean not painter but temperament. He sees. From my talks with him, I see that he has the romance, the fire, the color, the idiom of the land, unquote. Despite London's praise for the keenness of his mind's eye, Dupuy was quick to assure his readers that the events described in The Monster of Partridge Creek were witnessed by the physical eyes in his head. The story which follows is in no sense a romance, he began. I wish, in the first place, to ask the readers of the following narrative to believe that I am in no way attempting to impose upon their credulity. Concerning the amazing spectacle I am about to describe, I report nothing but plain facts, however astounding and apparently incredible they may seem at first glance, precisely as they appeared to my own eyes, unquote. Dupuy went on to explain how, in the early 1900s, one of his favorite Yukon haunts was a place called McQuestion Post. Although a trading post of that name once existed at the confluence of the Stewart and Yukon rivers, Dupuy hints in his story that the McQuestion Post to which he referred was the Northwest Mounted Police Station which lay at the southern shores of the Stewart River, opposite the mouth of McQuestion Creek, about 75 kilometers or 47 miles west of the town of Mayo, and 106 kilometers or 66 miles southeast of
Town
Dawson.
of Mayo, that seems racist.
Dupuy's friend, a French-Canadian Jesuit missionary named Father Pierre Lavenu, who tended to the spiritual needs of a nearby band of Clayoquot Indians, owned a cabin at McQuestion Post, which Dupuy visited every time he was in the area. One morning in the early 1900s, the story goes, Dupuy was enjoying a cup of coffee on the veranda of Father Levaneu's cabin when he heard a whistle from the direction of the Stewart River. The Frenchman glanced up from his mug and was delighted to see his friend James Lewis Butler kneeling in a bark canoe with an Indian at his fore and rear. The three men paddled over to the shore. Butler was a San Francisco banker who had left California in 1897 to try his luck in the Klondike. Dupuy knew that Butler had spent the past few months prospecting in the wild country north of the Stewart River, and was eager to learn whether he had met with any success. Butler's greatest discovery, Dupuy soon learned, had nothing to do with gold dust or nuggets. Just 2 days earlier, the banker had been making his way overland towards the Stewart River when he came upon a cabin belonging to a man named Grant, who invited him to stay the night. The following morning, Grant asked Butler if he would like to accompany him and two companions on a moose hunt. Butler agreed, and the four men headed to Partridge Creek, a tributary of the Stewart, which empties into the latter about 6 kilometers downstream from the mouth of the McQuestion River. The hunters made their way up a hill overlooking a mineral lick off Partridge Creek, where moose and caribou often came to taste the salt. Sure enough, they spied 3 enormous moose grazing in the valley below. Before any of the hunters could get off a shot, one of the animals, a young bull, let out a sharp bellow and crashed into the southerly bush, followed closely by his mates. We decided to approach the spot where the animals had taken fright so suddenly, Butler told Dupuy. Quote, arriving at the moose lick, a spot about 60 feet long and 15 feet wide, we saw in the mud, and almost on a level with the water of the lick, the fresh imprint of a body of a monstrous animal. Its belly had made an impression in the slime more than 2 feet deep, 30 feet long, and 12 feet wide. 4 gigantic paws, also deeply impressed, had left at the end of each imprint, and a little to the side, footprints 5 feet long by 2.5 feet wide, the claws being more than a foot long, the sharp points of which had buried themselves deeply in the mud. There was also the print, apparently, of a heavy tail, 10 feet long and 16 inches wide at the point, unquote. In the French language version of the story, Butler claimed that he and his companions found an enormous pile of strange greenish manure, which was clearly produced by some massive carnivorous animal lying in the middle of the trail.
I mean, the moose clearly
This
worked.
excrement terrified the Indians.
Okay, maybe moose.
Butler and his companions followed the mysterious tracks for about 5 or 6 miles, along the wooded banks of Partridge Creek, until the coulee sharpened into a steep gulch. There, the tracks abruptly ended, quote, as if by enchantment, unquote. At the conclusion of Butler's incredible tale, Dupuy suggested that the two of them assemble a hunting party and locate the mysterious creature that had made the tracks. By evening, Father Pierre Lavenue, a local miner named Tom Leemore, who was working a claim on the McQuestion River, and 5 Cleacuck Indians agreed to accompany Butler and Dupuy on their excursion. The Mounties who manned McQuestion Post, and a courier who was staying in the area, both of whom were skeptical of Butler's story, decided to remain behind with Butler's 2 Indian guides. Early the following morning, at about 5 o'clock, the hunters paddled across the Stewart River in canoes and headed into the forest. They searched for signs of their mysterious quarry all day, slogging through brush and muskeg as they explored both Partridge Creek and the easterly McQuestion River, making their way north towards their headwaters in a nameless range of snow-capped mountains.
It would even be able to live out there if it did.
The elusive creature was nowhere to be seen.
What's surviving?
That evening, the 9 companions set up camp at the crest of a cliff overlooking Partridge Creek and got a fire going. As they were boiling a pot of tea, the sound of falling stones could be heard in the ravine below. Before any of the men could investigate the commotion, a primeval roar ripped through the valley. Gripping their rifles with trembling hands, Dupuy and his companions crawled over to the edge of the cliff and peered into the ravine. Across the narrow valley, on the opposite side of Partridge Creek, an enormous grayish-black creature was attempting to ascend the opposite slope. As it struggled to gain purchase on the rocky hillside with its clawed feet, it sent boulders crashing into the valley below. Dupuy estimated that the monster measured 50 feet from its nose to the end of its tail, and that the crest of its spine stood 18 feet above the ground. Its snout was, quote, surmounted by a horn like that of a rhinoceros, while its hide was like that of a wild boar, garnished with thick bristles, unquote.
Sounds like a unicorn.
Slaver dripped from its jaws. The monster had apparently just finished its dinner.
And no, I'm
In the
not
English version of the
joking.
tale,
There
Father
are
Lavigny
like
declared that the
actual
creature-
unicorns look more like a boar with a horn, like a rhino. Like if you look up actual unicorns, I can't remember their exact
actual unicorns.
Give me a sec.
I figured it was just rhinos, but fair enough.
Yeah, give me a sec. Gotta remember the actual name of the animal.
50-foot unicorn. Oh, hell no.
Creature must be a dinosaur. In the French version, the Jesuit, through chattering teeth, identified the monster as a Ceratosaurus, a dinosaur on which American paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh had written extensively throughout the 1880s and 90s. The hunters watched the strange animal for a full 10 minutes, transfixed to the spot by both fear and fascination. We were in full possession of our senses,
first penguins, now this.
There was
Gonna
not,
ruin
and never will
unicorns,
be
too?
in our minds the least doubt as to the reality of what we saw. It was indeed a living creature, and not an illusion, which we had before us." Unquote. Finally, when the creature recognized the futility of its exercise, it quit the slopes and bounded into the valley of Partridge Creek on 2 legs, moving with astonishing agility. Following their terrifying encounter, Dupuy and Butler made a trip to Dawson City, where they entreated the Commissioner of Yukon Territory for mules and 50 armed men with which to destroy the monster of Partridge Creek. "Here my story ends,"
Assume they
Dupuy
just
wrote.
lay there, Chip.
"For a month we were the laughingstock of the Golden City, and the Dawson Daily Nugget published an article about me,
I mean, it makes
which
it
was
more
at the same time
terrifying, Kyle.
flattering and satirical,
Pigs are
entitled
vicious. Put a
Arrival of
horn on
Poe."
it?
Unquote.
Not even
Near the
just
beginning of
tusks.
the article, Georges Dupuy reproduced the contents of a letter that he claimed to have received from his friend Father Lavigny, which was written on New Year's Day 1908. After expressing his, quote, "affectionate wishes for Dupuy's health and happiness," unquote, and informing Dupuy of the death of John Spitz, the mail carrier for the Duncan district northeast of
What is
Mayo,
up, White-Eyes?
the priest disclosed that on New Year's Eve, just a week prior, he and 10 members of his native congregation had seen the monster of
Glad you
Partridge
showed
Creek
up.
a second time,
Kyle's
racing
attacking
over the
me.
frozen surface of the
So
creek with caribou
the name
clamped
of this
between its
creature
jaws.
is the
His fur
Elasmotherium,
was covered
and
with
I just
hoarfrost,
linked
he
the
wrote,
picture,
and his little eyes
or
gleamed
like a
fire in the
reconstruction of
twilight,
it, because we
unquote.
found it from fossils.
The priest estimated that the animal ran at a speed exceeding 10 miles an hour.
Let's see. Oh. That's
Tell me that
pretty
doesn't
much-
look exactly like what he just described.
Yeah, it does.
Yep. And that shit has been thought to have lived, let's see here, until at least 39,000 years ago. So, like, it being alive when they said, probably not. But, like, this shit was alive around the same time as humans.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. Yeah, that could definitely just be a unicorn for some people.
Yep.
Looks like a ox mixed with a rhino. Crazy looking.
And noted that the temperature at the time of the sighting was 45 degrees below zero. That's minus 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Accompanied by a local Indian chief and 2 of his sons, Father Lavigny followed the animal's steadily fading tracks 2 miles to the Stewart River, where the trail finally disappeared under a blanket of freshly fallen snow.
I mean, Kyle, it does whatever it wants at that point.
Many of those who have commented upon the monster of Partridge Creek believe that it was intended as a work of fiction. In his 2017 article, A Brief History of Cowboys and Dinosaurs, American comic book artist Stephen R. Bissett described the story as, quote, "one slice of great northern Yukon Territory fiction. Well, I'm convinced it's fiction, which has become enshrined as the real thing by certain cryptozoology circles," unquote. American cryptozoologist Lauren
Definitely.
Coleman echoed Bissett's statement in a May 27, 2020 Twitter post, referring to the piece as, quote, "pure #cryptofiction set in Canada," unquote.
It has to be.
Regardless of whether or not the story itself is true, the monster of Partridge Creek was clearly presented as a non-fictional account of an actual dinosaur sighting in the Yukon.
Kyle,
In the
that's what we
Strand
call a
magazine,
trap.
it is sandwiched between various non-fictional pieces, such as
just became
34-year-old
bait.
Winston Churchill's account of his parliamentary service in Uganda, and a variety of obviously fictional short stories, like a supernatural mystery by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle involving an overworked accountant and a haunted Scottish mirror. The magazine's editor firmly placed Dupuy's story in the non-fiction camp by giving it the headline, Stories Strange and True. Then, as if to dispel any remaining doubt as to its veracity, he added a short preamble, a direct translation of its French counterpart in Je sais tout, in which he declared that the story's author is, quote, a well-known French writer and traveler, whose good faith is beyond question, and who takes full responsibility for his narrative, which, it may be noted, however remarkable, is in no way contradicted by known scientific facts.
I mean, who's going to prove him wrong?
Subsequent to its debut in the Strand magazine and Je sais tout, The Monster of Partridge Creek was republished in newspapers throughout North America. The verbiage of these reprints often deviated slightly from the original, undergoing a subtle kind of rewording to which non-fictional news articles are often subjected, but to which fictional pieces are invariably immune. Some articles declared that Tom Lemore had taken 3 photographs of the creature during the encounter which Dupuy described.
Ain't no way.
Galvanized by the sensational articles, 29-year-old Hugh Grosvenor, the wealthy Duke of Westminster, reportedly planned a hunting trip in Yukon Territory for the express purpose of bagging the monster of Partridge Creek. In preparation for his upcoming adventure, the Duke allegedly chartered a German steamer at Hamburg and fitted it with a huge steel cage in which the beast was to be contained. His plans were ultimately foiled in 1914, when the Great War broke out in the Old World.
Sorry, no more dinosaur hunting.
The Duke volunteered for combat duty and served with distinction in a prototypical armored car squadron on the front lines in Egypt.
War getting in the way of research.
By the time the war was over, he had apparently forgotten about his intended Yukon expedition, or had a change of heart or circumstance, and never rescheduled his trip to Stewart River Country.
Dinosaurs.
Although the monster of Partridge Creek was certainly presented and initially received by many as a true story, its context in literary history suggests that it was very possibly fictional in nature. Despite that, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's novel, The Lost World, had not yet been published at the time the story was penned. Inspiration for a tale of prehistoric survivors was in ample supply in 1908. Verne, DeMille, Hine, and Curtis had already introduced living dinosaur fiction to the reading public, and American newspapers abounded with tales of mammoths and mastodons that roamed the frozen wastes of the subarctic. Perhaps most tellingly, Jack London's anthology, The Faith of Men,
what better
which
do you have to do,
translated
Kyle?
into French in 1904, included a tale entitled A Relic of the Pliocene.
Forget the dinosaur.
In this short story, the narrator encounters a lonely frontiersman deep in the subarctic bush, who tells him a campfire story about a live woolly mammoth, perhaps the last of its kind on Earth, which he encountered in a remote valley in what is presumably the Mackenzie Mountains of Canada's Northwest Territories. When the monster broke his gun and killed his dog, the frontiersman made it his mission to slaughter it. He accomplished this feat through persistence hunting, and celebrated his victory by crafting a pair of mucklucks from the mammoth's hide.
He's gonna John Wick the dinosaur.
If the monster of Partridge Creek indeed constitutes a piece of Northwestern fiction, it was not Georges Dupuy's first foray into the genre. 2 years earlier, he wrote a French-language story entitled Un drame à Klondike, or A Drama in the Klondike, which was published in the February 15, 1906 issue of Je sais tout. This story tells of a French-Canadian prospector who murdered 2 of his fellow countrymen in the subarctic for their gold, only to be driven away from his prize by his victims' vengeful sled dogs. Its context in literary history is not the only indication that the monster of Partridge Creek might be a fictional creation. In the very first paragraph, Dupuy refers to the Indians of the Stewart River as members of the Clayoquot tribe. In his French-language version, he implies that the Clayoquots comprise a band of Snow Indians, the Snow Indians perhaps being a general denotation for the Dene. In fact, the natives of Stewart River Country are members of the Northern Shoshone First Nation, no bands of which go by a name bearing any resemblance to the word Clayoquot.
He even made up his
The
own Native
Koyukuk
American.
Indians, on the other hand, whose name the word Clayoquot strongly evokes, are members of a subdivision of the Koyukon Nation, whose historical homeland lies in central Alaska, far from the Stewart River. Dupuy's inclusion of the Clayoquot Indians in his narrative, considering his intimate familiarity with the North Country, almost seems to be a subtle wink to his sourdough friends, to whom such an error, unnoticed by the vast majority of readers, might seem glaringly obvious. Dupuis' friend Jack London inserted a similar inside joke into his novel The Call of the Wild, with his inclusion of the murderous and completely fictitious Yehat Indians. Similar to the Clayoquot Indians, this author has failed to find any references to Father Pierre Lavenu, James Lewis Butler, and Tom Lemore in any books, academic articles, newspapers, or online posts, aside from those related to Dupuis' story. In a commentary on the monster of Partridge Creek, published in the September 1908 issue of the Knowledge and Illustrated Scientific News, English naturalist Richard Lydekker wrote, quote, that a living representative of the carnivorous dinosaurs of the secondary epoch should be living in the frozen north of Alaska seems incredible to every scientific mind. The prima facie presumption is that larger dinosaurs were inhabitants of warm rather than of Arctic zones, unquote.
What's good,
British cryptozoologist Carl Schuker, who was perhaps the first in his field to critique the story, expressed a similar opinion in his 1995 book In Search of Prehistoric Survivors, writing, quote, the monster of Partridge Creek merits a prominent place among the Dubatanda of cryptozoology. Bearing in mind that the existence of such an animal calls for our belief in the post-Cretaceous persistence of an endothermic hairy dinosaur in what must surely be the last compatible habitat for any type of large reptile living today, its lack of cryptozoological credibility should hardly come as a great surprise, unquote.
True.
Conversely, British journalist and Fortean writer Harold T. Wilkins, in his 1952 book Secret Cities of Old South America,
is an
argued that
that book, the book cover is pretty nice, but all the same, yeah, no, it's just a bunch of lies. Palate cleanser. Dog nopes.
Toto.
Huh? With this whole video is that the illusion doesn't work from the direction the dog is in.
You'd think it would have to be the other way around.
I'm pretty sure the dog has just been trained not to cross the carpet or the rug.
But visually for us. Back to TierZoo. We're at hippos now. Wait, that's the wrong link. Hold on.
Hippos are an absolutely OP.
I think so. I didn't think they were aggressive, but everybody told me differently.
That's how they
the game's hardcore
that's how they get you.
On top of the potentially lethal heat and disease debuffs, many of the most powerful builds in the game are playable only on the Africa server. Everyone knows the big names. Elephants are the biggest, cheetahs are the fastest, cobras are the most venomous, etc. However, one of the builds that frequently gets overlooked is the hippopotamus. Even though none of their stats are the best in a single category, there are things that they do better than anything else. So today I'm going to give an overview of the hippopotamus's stats and abilities, talk about its good and bad matchups, and where I'd rate it in the overall tier list.
I just have to
I've
run
already done
faster
one
than
video
you.
that sort of touches on all these things, but since it was one of the first videos I ever made, it's
About
pretty
70
lacking in
million.
quality. So hopefully this guide will do a better job doing the topic justice. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. Hippos are the premier tank build of the African aquatic meta. Their success comes from a combination of phenomenal stats and
I've never
from
seen a
stacking
hippo
into
being
abilities that allow
aggressive.
for some pretty ingenious exploitation of the game's water physics,
how they
which I'll
get
get
you.
into in a bit. But first, their stats. So you probably notice that the hippo stats are, in a word, phenomenal. They have one of the highest HP levels of any land build, second only to the elephant. Normally, builds with one unusually high base stat tend to have major shortcomings in other areas, but the hippo simply doesn't. While its intelligence is only average, all the rest of their stats far outclass most other African builds. They have great damage, high defense, and even have great stealth for a build in such a high weight class. But perhaps the most surprising is their mobility level,
Yeah,
which
I mean,
relates
just
to how
don't
their
get
abilities
near
let
the
them
giant
engage in
thing with the
physics
big
engine
mouth.
exploits, like I mentioned earlier.
Oh, geez,
So
they're
in
fast
addition to
swimmers.
having relatively high run speed
Wait,
on land,
why do they run so
hippos are
fast?
also unbelievably mobile
They
in the
are
water.
very fast.
Now, normally when designing your character to be fast in the water,
Faster
you spec
than
into
should be
traits like,
allowed.
Oh, hell
water
no.
mobility. Things like a streamlined body, fins, flukes, webbed feet, all these things strictly buff water speed, and usually are the go-to for
Yeah, I
players
just see 'em
trying to take
chilling
their
in
character
water,
to new
birds
depths
on
in
'em.
the aquatic meta. The hippo player
No,
base
what
decided
you
to do
see
exactly
them
none of
doing
that,
is
instead dumping
waiting.
most of their evolution
They're
points
just
into pure
waiting.
bulk and muscle. As
They
a
are
result,
waiting.
hippos are so dense that, unlike most animals, they do not float. This lets them be one of the only builds that can actually use the run movement option underwater with any success. So yeah, hippos, despite not
That's
actually
sneaky
being
too.
able
They
to
can
swim,
run
have one of the
underwater.
best aquatic
That's
movement
not
options
cool.
in the
If
game,
that's-
and they didn't even have to spend
Yeah.
any evolution
If that's
points on
not
aquatic
enough to
mobility
make
to do
you
so.
deathly
So,
afraid of
hippos
them,
have
I don't
four
know
signature
what will.
abilities. The first
Yeah,
being
I
the
have new
water
respect
dash
for
ability
hippos
that I just
already.
explained. Their second ability is their 2-inch thick skin. This ability is the reason behind their high defense level, and it grants them some of the best resistances in the game, particularly to the common
Cocaine
threats in the
Hippo, that
African
would be a
server.
great
It
movie.
grants them near total immunity to slash and bite type damage, since claws and teeth simply are too short to pierce their skin. This lets them shrug off the vast majority of standard attacks in the African meta, and is also crucial for letting
thing's
them
way too
survive
fast.
attacks even from groups of enemies,
Get
which is
drugged,
normally the
lions.
answer to defeating a high HP target. Defending from physical attacks is important, but it's just as critical to make sure your elemental resistances are adequate too. Because hippos have spec'd into the hairless trait in order to minimize mobility debuffs in the water, they're highly vulnerable to solar damage. In order to mitigate this issue, hippos have spec'd into sweat that grants them UV resistance and, as an added bonus, grants them resistance
right.
to infection.
They got
another hugely
sunscreen
beneficial
for
trait
sweat.
to have.
That's a good trait. Why don't we get that now?
Right? But once again, OP.
Jeez. Pablo Escobar? I did hear about that. I don't know how it went down, though. I'll have to see if I can find a video on it.
When you spend most of your time in unclean water, potentially with open wounds. The only downside is that while active, it gives the hippo players a reddish tint, temporarily lowering their stealth level. Their last special trait is their tusks. Hippos haven't spec'd into carnivory or even omnivory. They're strictly herbivorous and can't gain any XP from meat. However, regardless of this fact, they have one of the most damaging bites in the game. On top of the sheer force of the bite itself, which is around a ton,
They
by
can't
the way,
eat you, but they'll
their
still
tusks
try.
deal massive damage to anything they puncture. But on top of the hippo's damage potential, their tusks offer another important benefit: intimidation. So the most effective intimidation techniques are the ones that can be quickly switched on and off. A coral snake's colors are always bright,
Okay,
and a
there's like
spider
6
is always
videos.
creepy, but hippos aren't always terrifying. In fact, most of the time they appear non-threatening, yet in an instant
I
they can
assume
crank
they
up
were
the intimidation
non-threatening.
to 100 just by opening their mouths. A hippo player with intimidation active is one of the most intimidating things
Why is
in the
anything that
entire
pink
game,
scary?
easily being able to scare off even some of the bulkiest builds like rhinos.
Oh, gee.
Okay, so for
Yep.
matchups, hippos sport one of the most comfortable matchup spreads possible.
Hippo v Rhino.
Because they're highly resistant
Hippo
to
wins
bite and
every
slash
time.
attacks, most of the relevant predator matchups, such as crocodiles, lions, hyenas, and painted dogs, are highly favorable for the hippo. On top of this, the hippo's own attacks can one-shot any of those predators. As for bad matchups, Any builds that focus on stab-type weaponry can definitely give a hippo a hard time. In particular, elephants and rhinos both have long enough horns or tusks to pierce the hippo's thick skin and deal critical damage to a hippo foolish enough to challenge them. Fortunately, the rhino's low intelligence makes it highly susceptible to intimidate abilities, so that matchup is by no means unwinnable.
Low intelligence.
Elephants, though, they'll walk straight through a group of hippo players, knowing none of them will challenge it. Also, ironically, one of the worst matchups for a hippo is another hippo, since a hippo's tusks do have the potential to pierce their defenses. The last important matchup to discuss for them is how they fare against humans, and in this regard, they've got one of the best records of all. Obviously, they still lose to the highly advanced equipment that humans have recently unlocked, but aside from that, humans don't have any way to combat them. As a result, hippos have the highest KD ratio versus humans in the entire game. Even special high-level mounts, like boats and trucks, can be taken down by a hippo. So where do hippos belong on the tier list? Well, considering how they're basically unstoppable tanks that manage to spec into an excellent semi-aquatic playstyle without sacrificing any land-based abilities to do so, it's tough to argue that they're anything but S tier. They easily control any rivers or lakes that they're in, being even more dominant than crocodiles. In fact, while currently the vast majority of the hippo player base is in the African server, a few of them have recently broken into the South American meta. Now, hippos have one of the lower spawn rates in the game, so it'll be a while before we can really assess their viability in servers outside of Africa, but I would bet that eventually hippos will be one of the most dominant builds in South America too, especially since they have great matchups against the top tiers there too, like the caiman and the jaguar. The piranha player base might give them a hard time though, so we'll have to wait and see. Their thick hide offers a lot of protection, but with hundreds of bites chipping it away, even the hippo might struggle. Protecting your hit points is critical to survival in the current meta, but perhaps equally important is protecting your passwords, and that's where today's sponsor Dashlane comes in.
And here's the ad.
Dashlane is what I personally use to protect my passwords and keep myself safe online, because it literally does everything.
Real quick,
it's not just a password manager, it's not just a VPN, it's not just a dark web monitoring service, it's all three. Everything you could possibly need to keep your internet defense level at its max. My favorite feature of Dashlane is how it autofills every online login form on every website.
I look for Moose. I don't think Moose is on the TierZoo list.
Could be.
These are cocaine hippos. Sorry, they're not actually carrying cocaine. These 4,000-pound beasts are survivors from the era of Pablo Escobar, who smuggled in 4 of them from a U.S. zoo in the 1980s. These hippos, native to Africa, are pretty much celebrities in Colombia, but not everyone loves them. They've been busy, getting busy, since the kingpin of coke was taken down. There's up to 80 of them now, and researchers estimate that by 2040 the population will grow to more than 1,500, which is no good for the ecosystem of Puerto Triunfo. So many scientists are saying the only option is to kill them.
Couldn't be me.
Fortunately, invasive species, sometimes you gotta deal with them that way.
A reminder, Colombia shouldn't have a hippo problem. After Escobar was killed, the government took over the estate. It sent off some animals
He was
to
a
local
fucking
zoos,
insane
but these hippos roamed free
drug
since they were too
kingpin.
large and aggressive to capture.
Of course he was gonna have something crazy like hippos.
I guess.
In January, some well-meaning scientists offended the Colombian public by arguing in a scientific journal that the population needed a good old-fashioned cull. That's because Colombia is hippo paradise. Compared to their native habitat, they've got much more water and
Colombia
way
is
fewer
great for
natural
hippos.
predators to
Hippos
hunt.
are not great for
like
Colombia.
actually none at all. It's hard for a hippo to die here. So these coke hippos have tormented the local ecosystem, competing with native wildlife and polluting waterways with their toxic poops.
Exactly.
This fuels algae blooms and reduces oxygen available for native fish.
The real problem with hippos is their uncontrolled reproduction. Being such a territorial species, it offers a latent danger for fishing population and other people who live in this area.
So we don't have moose,
but people
we do
who
have
live in the
something
area
to tie together
are
the last
obsessed
video.
with hippos.
Que no nos los maten porque ellos son animales que quieren
got
vivir
geese.
igual a
You cool with
nosotros.
geese,
Y queremos
White
que estos hipopótamos como nosotros también sigan viviendo acá en este río y sigan siendo parte de nuestra economía y de nuestro sustento y de la belleza natural que aquí podemos presentar.
There's a whole hippo economy. Hippo safari tours, hippo-themed shops. And when each of the 50,000 annual tourists flock to Escobar's old hacienda, now a theme park, They're greeted by this statue of the area's unofficial mascot.
Imagine being
All this
such
makes it really
a
hard to
big,
get away with a call.
like, crime boss that after you die, they turn your home into a goddamn theme park.
That seems appropriate. Said no one ever. Let's go to Cocaine Land.
Residents see it as a scientist-sanctioned hippogenocide. But there is another way.
Oh, they're gonna castrate
like, a lot
the
of debate about
hippos.
what should be done about them, how it should be done. People in Colombia and internationally are very resistant to
That's
killing
horrible.
hippos.
Professor Shuren's working with government biologists to
I
implement
mean, it's
a
better than
chemical
killing 'em.
sterilization program,
I
since
don't know.
castrating a hippo is really tough, practically impossible. Colombia's actually been trying to castrate Escobar's hippos since 2013. They've only managed to
A hippo
castrate about
defensive
one per year, and it's because their testes are, well, hard to get to.
Males and females have
Can't you
internal
chemically
gonads, so
castrate
they're all of their reproductive parts are inside of their body. So it's not like castrating a sheep or a pig.
Not only are their balls internal, but they vary in depth, making them tough to find, which leaves sterilization
I'll stays
as the
banned.
only non-lethal option.
You leave them their favorite food, which is cabbage, and then you sort of build a little pen around it, and they just keep coming back into the pen, and then get them used to the pen, and then one day you just slam the door shut, and then you've got a hippo in a pen, and then you can dart it and
He's banned for
sterilize
criminal
it. They're hard to
stupidity.
catch because they only come out at night. Basically, you have
What?
to give them a couple shots.
Sneaky,
it's like
sneaky
giving a
hippo.
coronavirus vaccine.
Some scientists say the current sterilization program won't be enough.
Sterilization alone is not going to be enough to control this invasion. If we kill a certain number of individuals
ninja
per year,
hippos.
it's possible to eradicate the population.
If they do decide to kill the hippos, they expect less hippo poop, meaning cleaner waters and more oxygen for fish. But they might be too iconic to sway the public.
It's normal that they have this empathy for the hippos. Hippos are so big and so great. Think about also in the other species of animals that are living there and that are probably going to suffer the consequences of this invasion. For me, what is necessary here is to protect and conserve
So
the
you can see
integrity
from the
of
pictures
our
on the wall that
ecosystem
she has a
over
bias.
an exotic species.
She's
Even if this
anti-hippo.
exotic species is super charismatic and super cute.
Giant rats.
This episode was sponsored by Squarespace.
Sorry, Why this is the best I can do. There may be a moose in here somewhere.
We all know that humans are overpowered and deserve a nerf. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any good counterplay options. And while there are plenty of builds in the game that can harass humans, none have achieved the same infamy that the Goose has. The Goose is easily one of the most polarizing characters in the entire game, with plenty of players complaining to the devs that it needs to be nerfed. But let's do a deep dive into their stats and abilities before we jump to conclusions here. Are they really that OP? Are there any really solid counterplay
Killer
options?
whales are ridiculous.
Let's start with their two signature abilities. The first one dramatically boosts their resolve, granting near total immunity to intimidation effects, while the second one drastically increases the effectiveness of the Goose's own intimidation abilities. This can lead to some absolutely hilarious situations, where builds which could potentially one-shot a Goose don't even have enough resolve to resist losing their nerve. The bigger the opponent is, the less
Intimidation.
effective their intimidation effects are against geese. So while a dog may spook them, behemoths like giraffes, cows, and elephants are unable to scare off the Goose. Next, let's have a look at the base stats of the Goose. Right off the bat, we notice that their best stat is HP, followed closely by their mobility.
HP for real?
This is a bit of an unorthodox build,
Yep.
to be honest, which could be part of the reason that they're so successful. Most tanks tend to have high HP, of course, but they also tend to favor defense and power over mobility. But there's one other thing worth paying attention to on this stat chart, their power level. It's
Take your lunch money, then
The
bitch you
Goose
for
build's
being
max
poor.
hit is so low that it would take ages for them to ever actually bring down an opponent's HP to 0. In some cases, their DPS literally can't even match the natural health regeneration of their targets. So how is it that a build with almost no combat potential has been so dominant in the meta lately? Well, it ties back into their abilities. Intimidation-based abilities synergize perfectly with the Goose's stats. Their goal with Intimidation is to grant themselves control over an area, and when it works, the Goose player typically doesn't actually need to deal any damage in order to end the battle. But should the target resist their intimidation
like,
attempts,
chill.
the two most important stats are going to be HP and mobility. HP so that if the opponent counterattacks, you'll be able to take a hit or two and still keep up the pressure. And mobility so that if they actually do turn the tide of battle, you'll be able to escape. In addition to having good stats for the job, the Goose build is also perfectly suited to conquer the newly created city park biomes that have become more commonplace due to the continued dominance of the human build. So what can you as a player do to counter the Goose's notorious strategy?
Yes, we did.
Well, I think the chink in the armor is pretty apparent. They do basically no physical damage, so your own HP and defense level is not really something you need to worry about if you end up in a skirmish with them. Their attack strategy depends entirely on intimidation, so if your character can resist their intimidation attempts, you'll have pretty much won the battle before it ever began. So to increase your chances of resisting intimidation, you need to have a high resolve stat, which can be gained either by having high intelligence or by playing in groups. Once you've managed to stay in the fight, winning should be relatively easy, but I have some tips for that too. Geese really have only 3 different attack moves, those being Aerial Ace, Wing Attack, and Peck. Aerial Ace and Wing Attack are both pretty standard rushdown attacks,
getting right.
being short range,
Why are you
low
broke?
power. But Peck is an interesting move, because it's technically a spacing type move.
He
It has
left
a lot of
out
range,
Bite.
like most spacing attacks do.
Bite is a
but the
huge
interesting part
attack
about
on
it is that it's
Geese.
actually very
Bite's
vulnerable.
there.
Most spacing moves rely on a disjointed weapon that can pressure an opponent from a safe distance. Whether it's in the form of horns, claws, or a long beak, the function is basically the same. But with Geese, instead of using a protected part of their build, they're actually taking a huge risk whenever they lunge at a target. So if you target their neck and punish them whenever they try to peck you, you can really make the matchup difficult for them. Another thing that's near impossible for them to deal with is stealth, since their intimidation abilities are useless when they can't see the attacker coming before it's too late. So with that in mind, here are some basic tips for beating Geese. Number 1, try to resist intimidation. Number 2, target their weak point for massive damage. And number 3, use stealth to prevent them from abusing intimidation abilities. Now, for you Goose mains out there, don't worry, I'm not just going to give away all your secrets without giving you a tip as well. This is a big one. Goose players, you need to do a better job avoiding grabs. Your high mobility stat doesn't do you any good if you get caught and can't fly away
Low
or
resistance to
swim.
Raggle Fraggle.
Because geese, like most birds, have hollow bones, they're especially vulnerable to crush-type damage, the kind often inflicted from grabs.
Oh.
The obvious implication here is that learning different matchups is important. You need to learn which builds are focusing on finding grabs. You also need to recognize that all 3 of your offensive moves have a blind spot directly behind you, and so it's absolutely essential that you don't let an opponent cross you up and grab you from behind, because once that happens, you're out of options. This makes it especially difficult to battle 2 opponents at once, since it's nearly impossible to avoid getting grabbed by one while you're attacking the other. But really, the best tip I can give Goose mains is that you should switch to a build that can actually back up its intimidation attempts. A build that even geese are afraid of. The Swan. Swans are basically everything scary about geese, but shifted to maximum overdrive. Unlike geese, swans can dish out some serious damage.
Oh, geez,
and on top of that, their aesthetics level is one of the highest in the game. But yeah, swans and geese, both excellent builds. But in my opinion, the swan is the better choice because of their higher power and better aesthetics. Aesthetics is something that is difficult to master, not only in animals, but also in web design. If you're looking to create a website but don't know where to
bridge
start,
the gap between the cryptids and
this episode was sponsored by Skillshare.
basically geese.
Ah. Nice.
What the hell, Kyle? You hit me with the Bedford Forest? Oh!
One of the most controversial balance updates the devs have ever introduced was patch 1.3.1, the update which banned and nerfed the vast majority of dinosaurs, marine reptiles, and pterosaurs. And so it should come as no surprise that one of the requests that the devs get the most is to reintroduce dinosaurs back into the game. The devs have never unbanned any classes before, but what would the meta look like if the devs actually obliged and allowed players to spawn as dinosaurs again? Well, to answer that question, we first need to understand why dinosaurs were banned in the first place. And believe it or not, I was actually given the opportunity to ask one of the devs this very question. So a lot of people have been wondering, why were the dinosaurs banned?
You know, I get this question a lot because the dinosaur class was one of the most popular in the history of the game, and we definitely got a lot of pushback when you released the first extinction pack. But to be honest, the meta was just getting stale, especially with players opting to play larger and larger land carnivores like the T-Rex. Like one balance update, we tried to buff herbivores by putting 2 additional horns on the Uniceratops, but of course the T-Rex players just spec'd into higher attack. Then one time we even tried to nerf the rage ability of the T-Rex players by increasing the frequency they want to engage in sexual behavior, but then players thought it would be funny to shorten their arms. So eventually we figured it's not worth dealing with all these complications and we should just go for the hard reset, lower the oxygen levels to limit the size wars of different classes, and encourage more nuanced skill trees. And while we are seriously considering a dinosaur remaster due to popular demand, to be honest, even now, if you look at most character models, they're just shrunk down, reskinned dinosaurs we put fur on so you couldn't tell.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to comment on this matter. Okay, so what would it look like if dinosaurs were unbanned? First, let's talk about dinosaurs in general. The dinosaur build's main advantage is its massive size. At fully grown, the only things that could take it down were other giant dinosaurs and potentially pack hunting builds. While size is an advantage on defense, it can be a challenge for overall survivability. Dinosaurs require a massive amount of food, potentially more than the current game could provide. And so if the devs were to unban dinosaurs, they'd likely also need to buff the spawn rates of pretty much everything. Your average dinosaur build also tends to be pretty modest when it comes to speed and intelligence, having speed comparable to an elephant and intelligence comparable to crocodiles. This means that most of the current top tiers will outspeed and outsmart them on a regular basis. But this isn't the case for all dinosaurs, so let's get into the specifics now. Let's start with the herbivores. So I don't think hadrosaurs would be very viable at all, seeing as they have no good defensive abilities to protect themselves with. Their best trait is that they can communicate effectively and keep watch over each other. But the best hunters today rely on stealth, a strategy specifically meant to get around this problem. Hadrosaurs would be great at spotting tall carnivore players from far away, but not stealthy builds that stay low to the ground and move through the brush.
The closest relatives to primates are lemurs and shrews. So the precursor to all of these would have been like a small furry mammal.
Yeah, I was like, is it some kind of rat or something on that order? Yeah,
no, rodents are farther from us. So rodents and rabbits split off from what's called the Euarchonta, EUARCHONTA. And then that clade split off into shrews, and then lemurs, and then primates.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Now you might be thinking, oh, that's no problem. The herbivores could just outrun them. But large herbivores had much lower mobility than today's top predator builds. They'd be most comparable to an elephant, like I said before. But where elephants lack in mobility, they make up for with intelligence. You can't say the same for dinosaurs. But not all herbivores would be in such a bad position. Hadrosaurs lack any form of weaponry, but other herbivores are much more well-armed. Triceratops is perhaps the most well-known armed herbivore, and it's easy to see why. At full speed, a Triceratops could one-shot even the tankiest of opponents. But with that said, the carnivore player base has gotten much better at dealing with front-facing weapons like horns and tusks. So Triceratops may find itself struggling to fend off attacks that come from behind or come from multiple angles. Getting behind an opponent has become a staple trick of every carnivore's playbook, especially for canine and feline builds. Sauropods were at an interesting place in the meta back during the Mesozoic, and would definitely still be if they were brought back today. Their late game stats were simply impossible to beat one-on-one. No other land build has ever achieved even close to the same base stat total. Even the top predators of the time barely stood a chance, even in teams. But they only reach this potential in the late game and have relatively few defensive options during early and mid game, aside from just relying on high-level teammates. This means that their teammates need to be able to stop an attack before it's too late. Because of their extreme height, predators would just about never be able to sneak up on a sauropod clan in an open field. But approaching using stealth isn't the only way to catch a vigilant opponent off guard. Hiding in trees is another option, one that's employed by some of the most powerful builds of present day. Big cats tend to target the neck of their opponents, and, well, it would be pretty hard to miss. Even the top tier Jaguar probably couldn't one-shot a high-level sauropod, but all of the arboreal big cats would definitely be a problem for juveniles. Potentially so problematic that not enough of them would be able to reach the late game to defend the lower level players. It's hard to say. Overall, they could be completely viable or completely helpless. Not much in between. In my opinion, the herbivore builds best suited to survive in the current meta would be the ones with tail weapons, specifically stegosaurs and ankylosaurs. As previously mentioned, the top predator builds tend to attack from behind, avoiding a face-to-face confrontation, and staying out of range of being hit by counterattacks with horns, tusks, and bites. This strategy works great against the tanky herbivore classes of present day, but an attack from behind would be an awful idea against a build with a club or thagomizer. In addition, the armor on their back would make it much harder for assassin builds like big cats to land their critical strikes. Of all of the herbivores, I find these to be the most likely to become top tier if they were unbanned. Now onto the carnivores. So this might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think large tyrannosaurs would fare well in the current meta. Tyrannosaurs are min-maxed to optimize for damage, which was great when their goal was to be able to bring down tanks with HP levels as high as the dinosaurs. The only build of present day that this would be important to have against would be the elephant. And while that is important, having only one good matchup is not a top tier strategy. All elephant players would need to do to counter this specific tactic is spec into slightly higher mobility, since the T-Rex's top speed is extremely low compared to builds of present day. Smaller tyrannosaurs like Albertosaurus and Daspletosaurus would still be viable though, since they haven't sacrificed as much mobility as the T-Rex has. Mobility really is the name of the game for predators right now. And it's the reason that I'd put dromaeosaurs like Velociraptor and Deinonychus as the best contenders for being too OP for the current meta. And not just because of their excellent mobility, but also because they really wouldn't need to adjust much from their playstyle in the Cretaceous. Raptor builds in the Cretaceous preyed mostly on small animals like prehistoric mammals, and occasionally banded together to take down midweight and heavyweight builds. This niche is still very much available today, and raptors would have little trouble in combat versus builds like possums, raccoons, and birds. This is the same role that the fox and coyote occupy right now. So the question then becomes, could raptors compete with them? In one-on-one combat, I do think raptors have the edge. While raptors do have lower HP than any canine, they also have much more burst damage potential. Canines use the persistence hunting strategy and need to land several attacks in order to bring down a target. Raptors, on the other hand, deal much higher damage because of their sickle claw that can potentially one-shot an enemy. Both employ team strats, and both have high mobility and intelligence. So all else being equal, the ability for raptors to out-damage the canines would, in my opinion, win them the day. So overall, if individual dinosaur builds were unbanned, the stegosaurs, ankylosaurs, and dromaeosaurs would most likely be top tier, while the others might end up struggling. Dinosaur players would need to learn a lot of new abilities to be able to contend with how advanced the meta is, especially when it comes to how OP humans are. Luckily, if you're looking to quickly and easily learn new skills, Skillshare has you covered. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes.
You know, I want to start playing a game, which is pause right after the segue to the ad, and I will see if I can figure out, based on like the one sentence segue, what the sponsor of the video is, because it's getting so goddamn predictable.
It seriously is, but at least he does it at the end.
Yes, yeah, that is nice that he doesn't like put it in the middle.
So here we go, AnCom. The worst builds.
Oh Lord.
Now, there are a lot of choices you have to make when spending your evolution points. Adapting in the right ways can really take your gameplay to the next level, but speccing into the wrong abilities and stat combos can actually end up reducing your build's viability. There are a lot of traps players can fall into when choosing which perks they want. So today I want to talk about the 5 most common pitfalls that I see in the builds of today's metagame. Mobility is a costly stat. Movement costs energy, and careless overuse of it can drain your stamina to a dangerous level. If your stamina gets low, your HP will start to go down too, so inefficiency can pretty quickly lead to a game over. For example, the hummingbird needs to find an energy source every 10 minutes or it's game over. Being able to hover in place and having full 360-degree motion costs a lot, energetically speaking, so it's super easy for them to burn through their stamina and eat into their HP reserves. The same can be said about shrews, which have to eat up to 2 times their own body weight per day just to not burn out. Cheetahs experience this issue to some extent too. Their top speed outclasses all other land builds, but this ability has an extremely long cooldown because when it's used, it burns through a ton of stamina. It generates a lot of body heat, and since cats can't sweat, this heat cannot be dissipated on the move like it can in humans, for example. Personally, I think this style of gameplay is extremely risky. It's high risk, high reward though, since obviously all three of these builds offer pretty unique advantages. Hummingbirds have agility that can match that of the dragonfly, cheetahs have record-breaking speed, and shrews have a venomous bite. So, tool use is one of the most broken abilities in the game. Among other things, tool use allowed humans to ascend to top tier and dominate the meta. Other builds can use tools too, and can mitigate the shortcomings of their stats and abilities. Chimpanzees can't dig particularly well, but they can still access termites by using tools, and can do so because they've spec'd into hands instead of paws or hooves. Cephalopods have horribly low defensive stats, but they can still block attacks using tools. They can do this because they not only have the intelligence required, but also because they have suction cups that can grab items instead of just having fins. But there are a lot of builds that have the intelligence required to use tools, but can't due to a lack of dexterity. Builds like dogs, dolphins, and pigs all fit that description. Now obviously all of those builds are anything but low tier, but I do think it's their biggest shortcoming.
Pigs are OP.
One of the biggest pitfalls I see struggling players fall into is that after they get bodied in the server
There's a
several
reason
times,
one of the easiest ways
instead
to
of
hide a
continuing
body
to
is
evolve
chop it up
trying to
and
come
put
up
it
with
in
a counter
a
strategy to
pig's feed
whatever's
trough.
defeating them. They'll instead invest some points into nocturnal abilities and avoid the issue entirely. That sounds like a smart play, but all you're doing is nerfing your own character, wasting precious evolution points and playing on easy mode. In most servers, the day lasts longer than the night, so daytime players have much more time to gain experience. Notice how prosimians are always nocturnal, except on Madagascar where they don't have to contend with apes and monkeys. Notice how bats are nocturnal, except the ones that have spec'd into a bulky enough build that they don't have to worry about hawks and eagles as much. More and more players are making this mistake because of human activity during the daytime, and it's severely hampering their ability to improve and overcome the increasingly challenging human matchup.
Trash Panda.
This next one is a two-parter having to do with teeth and tooth regeneration. Teeth are one of the most common weapons in the game, and there are a lot of special perks teeth can have. Hypodermic needle teeth are perfect for dealing venom damage. Serrated teeth deal bonus bleed damage. Pointy teeth make it harder for the target to escape a grab combo. Large teeth give you a passive intimidation bonus and can work as a disjointed hitbox. The list goes on. But for players that use teeth as a main part of their game plan, the ability to regenerate teeth can be critical. The first mistake I see players make is having brittle teeth without speccing into the tooth regeneration perk. Without this ability, breaking a tooth can be a game ender for builds like lions or wolves. So if you rely on teeth as your main source of damage, be sure to choose the regeneration perk as one of your abilities, to ensure you don't incur a devastating damage debuff by breaking your teeth. Look at sharks and crocodiles for examples of top tier builds that constantly replace their teeth. Okay, but on the other end of the spectrum, if you're playing a non-DPS build, I really don't recommend having too good a tooth regeneration ability. It might seem like something that you'd always want just in case, but many players end up running into the opposite problem. They don't use their teeth enough and actually end up taking damage when their teeth grow too long. Many warthog, rodent, and rabbit mains lose the game because their teeth weren't used enough to keep them from growing out. So the point here is, if you're a DPS player, tooth regen is a great perk. If you're a non-DPS player, you may want to think twice and make sure you really need it before choosing this perk. The techniques that a high intelligence stat grants you access to are the most broken techniques in the entire game, but they require time to master, and are also best learned by having another player use the teach skill. If your build has a short lifespan, it's very difficult to gain the experience required to perfect these techniques. Builds like the crow and octopus, although just as smart as parrots and elephants, can never hope to achieve the same level of knowledge and wisdom. The reverse is true too. A build with an extremely long lifespan but low intelligence is being equally wasteful of their potential. Thanks again for watching, and thanks especially to my patrons on Patreon. Until next time, good luck out there.
So I just found out something interesting from my spouse, which is that the Steam box they announced is going to have a skin that makes it look like a companion cube in Portal.
What'd you say? Sorry.
Oh, I said the Steam box that they announced recently is going to have a skin that makes it look like a companion cube from Portal.
Oh, nice. Somebody mentioned that that would be a great thing for them to do that they missed the boat on, and I guess they figured
They
it
did
out.
not. Yeah.
Fair
They
enough.
did not miss said boat.
Can't complain. Shall we keep up on the TierZoo, or is there something else that you would like to watch?
I'm good
as we
with
do
whatever.
this? Cool. I think it was Desperado that posted it, saying that they should do the companion cube thing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just for the sake of it, I want to see what this is capable of.
This episode was sponsored by Squarespace.
And then pigs. Because pigs are my favorite next to crickets. Oof.
Honey badgers, one of the most memed builds in the game. They have the reputation of being nearly indestructible, and also extremely bold when it comes to challenging other players to fights. But what is it about the honey badger's stats and abilities that make them such an unstoppable force? To understand that, first we need to understand the guild that they're part of, Mustelids. Since the start of my channel, Mustelids have been my most requested topic. So as a preemptive thank you for reaching 1 million subscribers, here's the video you've all—
What'd you say, AnCom?
Oh, I said I hate how he pronounces that word. He says it mustelid. It's fucking mustelid.
Makes sense.
Been waiting for. So, Mustelids are a unique guild of carnivore players that were kind of forced to get creative with their strategies in order to stay relevant. See, the Caniform build, the one a huge chunk of the mammal player base is based on, already had 2 high-tier builds take hold in the meta, those being the dogs and the bears. These builds were too powerful to compete with directly, and so more janky strategies started to crop up. You had some that took the canoid build and adapted it to a marine playstyle, allowing them to avoid dogs and bears entirely. At least for the most part. And then you have the Mustelids, which opted for a unique combination of defensive abilities and mobility perks that somehow allowed them to compete directly with the dogs and the bears, and in some cases, granted them favorable matchups versus builds that canines struggle against. They've also got particularly dense fur that offers defense from attacks and also negates frost damage. However, they aren't without their weaknesses. Their short limb length means that their mobility caps out lower than other caniforms, which means they don't really have the option to flee from a fight. The base Mustelid build is the Weasel. Their lack of bulk and short legs means that their HP and mobility stats are quite low even for their size, but their slender build does grant them a unique and important advantage. It allows them to follow their prey into their burrows. Rabbits, snakes, and moles are all safe from most larger predators below ground, but weasels are completely unfazed by this defensive tactic. But with that said, they're easily bested by even mid-tier carnivores like foxes and coyotes. They also haven't got much defense against birds of prey. Mustelids are actually the most diverse carnivorean guild in the game, but to be honest, many of them are mid-tier at best. So today we're going to focus on the 3 most viable Mustelids in the current meta, starting with everyone's favorite, the honey badger. Don't worry, I'm not here to tell anyone that honey badgers are actually low-tier trash. They're quite effective in the current meta, owing most of their success to 2 abilities. The first is an AoE morale debuff in the form of their odor gland. Now, they don't have the same projectile capabilities that skunks do, but they can still create a noxious zone around them that inhibits aggressors. It's especially effective at pacifying large groups, making it extremely useful for dealing with the swarms of bees that they have to deal with when they're looking for honey. The second ability is their loose skin and thick fur combo, that makes dealing any significant damage to a honey badger extremely difficult. Their small eyes and wide necks make landing a critical hit near impossible, meaning that they have no problem challenging builds that normally rely on crits to win, such as big cats. It also helps defend against builds that utilize venom, because getting fangs or stingers through thick fur and hide isn't easy. Overall, I'd place the honey badger in low A tier. But when it comes to power, honey badgers are actually not the strongest of all the Mustelids. That honor falls to the wolverine, an animal so fearsome that even though they don't have retractable claws or regenerative powers, this X-Men hero is still named after it.
Oh, jeez.
But more importantly, the wolverine is perhaps the most effective intimidation build in the game, because while it can deal enough damage to bring down prey on its own, It's primarily a scavenger that uses its extreme durability and power to scare more conventionally powerful predators away from their own loot. Birds, wolves, and panthers all get their kills stolen by wolverines quite frequently. One wolverine allegedly even bested a polar bear in battle. They also have wide feet that allow them to negate the mobility reduction caused by deep snow. On top of all of this, they too have access to the same stink bomb AoE move that the honey badgers do. In fact, their odor effect is so powerful that they've been nicknamed the Stink Bear, which is saying a lot considering bears are also one of the smelliest builds in the entire game. All this combined makes the Wolverine a top-tier Tundra survivalist class.
Nothing but a stink bear.
But as tough as they are, there's one more Mustelid on our list that I rank even higher. The last build on this list is the most intelligent Mustelid, and also the only one that's fully aquatic, the Otter. Because of their special ability, Webbed Feet, otters get a huge mobility bonus in water, turning what would be a relatively average build on land into an apex predator in the water. Most Mustelids are solitary, but some otters, such as the giant otter, form tight clans that enable them to tackle challenges they couldn't alone, such as defeating opponents like anacondas and even caimans. But what really makes this build so impressive is that instead of speccing into the same odor effect that other Mustelids do, they spent their evolution points on higher intelligence.
Yes, I did.
It's one of a very short list of builds with access to the tool use perk. Otters can deal with extremely high defense levels by cracking their target's armor using stones, which grants them an exclusive food source other carnivores simply don't have the skills or tools to access. And because of all of this, it's otters that are the OP Mustelids, not honey badgers.
Why did I saw it coming?
Mustelids are often hunted by humans because of the fur that they drop when defeated. Not only is this fur completely hydrophobic, granting the wearer water and frost resistance, but it's also very sleek and elegant. But you know what else is sleek and elegant? The websites you can make using Squarespace.
I was watching chat, why does, but yeah, I see you mention it. Nice. Good call.
And on to pigs. Where's my TierZoo? Pigs were OP. And we got Squarespace.
One of the most popular roles in the game is the role of tank. Tank builds don't specialize in scoring eliminations on other players, or on using stealth or agility to avoid attacks. Rather, tank players have one goal: to control space. They have to be intimidating, hard to move, and hard to defeat. In a lot of cases, this involves being larger than your competition. Think builds like the elephant and hippopotamus. However, being larger than the predator players in the region doesn't have to be the case.
Now I'm just reminded of the
Enter
20
the
and
hog
30
build.
feral boars.
Unlike most tanks, which tend to dump most of their points into HP, hogs are actually quite balanced stat-wise, with great damage because of their powerful bite and tusks, and surprisingly high intelligence too. Hogs also have a massive advantage over most tanks in that rather than being herbivorous, hogs are generalists that can eat just about anything, making them extremely adaptable. Their adaptability is why even though several different hog builds live across just about every server, they don't differ too much between builds. There are three I want to highlight: the boar, the warthog, and the babirusa. The boar is the largest and boasts the highest intelligence, HP, and power of all the hogs. There's also the warthog, the premier hog build in the African server. Because warthogs would be significantly outgunned even if they had the boar's combat stats, warthogs opt for a more mobility-centered playstyle, using their agility to dodge attacks from assassins like lions and leopards. With that said, warthogs do also have larger tusks, which grants them a higher chance to crit for massive damage. Most of this video will focus on these two since they best exemplify the powerful traits hogs possess. The babirusa is a build I discussed in my flawed builds video. It has very similar stats to the warthog, but has the tooth regeneration ability, which in the right situation can be very powerful, but in the babirusa's case, means that unless the player frequently breaks their tusks, eventually they'll grow so long that they'll start inflicting stab damage on the player's own weak point. Not much else to say about them, so let's get back to the hog overview. So in terms of special abilities, hogs have two main ones in addition to their omnivory. The first is venom resistance. Now, hogs don't actually have any special perks that specifically counteract venom, but they do have skin that's so thick that snake fangs are actually unable to deliver venom to the bloodstream, which lets them shrug off most bites without much concern. This makes the hog build an excellent counter to the snake class. Their second and more important ability is their snout, which has two important functions. The first is detecting loot such as tubers, eggs, and nuts. Pigs have an unsurprisingly excellent sense of smell. which is critical because, unlike most tank builds, they did not spec into the Ruminant ability. Ruminant players can eat pretty much any plant and gain enough experience to sustain themselves. But Hogs have to find special, more rare sources in order to keep their playthrough going. It's not enough to just be able to detect loot though, especially if it's hidden somewhere below the ground. Luckily for pig mains, their most recognizable and impactful ability is their ability to dig. Hooves grant a speed bonus on rough and flat terrain, but they have 3 main weaknesses. They offer no mobility bonus for swimming. They actually incur a movement penalty on soft terrain like sand and snow, and they're pretty poor digging tools. Digging is a skill that's usually only available to players who've spec'd into paws or claws rather than hooves, but because pigs have snouts that are reinforced with both extra bone and cartilage, their snouts can basically be used like a shovel, which is perfect for unearthing all sorts of rare and valuable loot. Digging helps offset another big weakness that hogs have. They can't cool themselves down on their own. They don't have the ability to sweat, of course, since that's an exclusive human ability. So what hogs have to do is use their snouts to dig up mud to wallow in. Wallowing grants them a temporary heat resistance buff, which is crucial for succeeding in places like the African server. Both the wild boar and the warthog boast considerable offensive strength in addition to their other abilities. Their charge attack can deal significant enough damage to deter most predator players, and even completely eliminate them from the game if multiple hogs attack at once. However, hogs used to be far stronger offensively, so strong in fact that at one point the devs had to nerf their attack strength. Back during the Miocene expansion, there was a build known by the community as the Hell Pig. Even though it was technically part of the Hippo faction and not a true hog build, it laid the groundwork for the playstyle that the later hogs would emulate. While it didn't have as high of an intelligence level as modern hogs do, it far outclassed them in both HP and power. Hell Pigs were still omnivorous, but because they had the strength to easily take down other players, they erred more on the side of carnivore than today's hog builds do.
Jeez.
They hunted in packs and either took down prey themselves or
Look
used
like
their
aliens.
absolutely broken intimidation abilities to steal loot from other solo predator mains. Instead of tusks, Hell Pigs had massive fangs that could easily one-shot most players from that
Freaking
time.
Hell Pig?
Even though they had the stats to function as a tank, they were so powerful that they were usually played in mostly offensive roles. Eventually, after they'd spent a good stretch of time as the #1 build in the meta, the devs dropped the Ice Age balance patch. Large, muscular builds, like the Hell Pig, couldn't deal with the ice damage and fell out of the meta, leaving their niche open for the modern pig build, which had thick, cold-resistant skin and fat stores, to come in and wreak havoc. Now, at this point, I've discussed all the relevant hog builds from past and present, but I bet you're wondering why I haven't discussed these. And that's because the pigs that humans farm and spawn kill are literally just wild boar. They aren't a separate build. They have exactly the same stats and abilities, and on occasions where they've escaped, populations of feral pigs quickly revert to their wild form. It's for this reason that if human civilization ever disappeared, pigs would easily dominate most servers. So hopefully now you have a better grasp on the stats and special abilities of the pig build. I'd place them at the high end of A tier, being excellent generalist tanks that can adapt to just about any challenge. However, they lack that X factor to really get them into S tier like their ancient counterparts were.
Boars.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I feel like you're not giving our porky partners enough credit here. Pigs are easily S tier once you consider their unique function as a human support class.
Matt, I get that you and the Extra Credits crew think that bacon is worth a ton of experience, but being farmed and spawn killed by humans doesn't really make you a support class.
Oh, I'm not talking about livestock, my good man. You're completely overlooking their historical significance. Pigs were instrumental during the colonialization of the New World, arguably even more than horses. In fact, did you know, in some cases, pigs actually modified new ecosystems long before the Europeans
Minnesota can get it.
Perhaps I should reconsider.
TierZoo, I can convince you, I promise. Just follow me over to our new Hogtastic episode of Extra History via the link in the description below to learn the full story. And as an added bonus, see a bunch of cute drawings of pigs.
I certainly will. See you there.
No ad on this one. What was that the ad?
I mean, it was just a cross promo, but you know, may as well go over and watch that video. Who knows? Could be fun.
Stupid?
No, I'm 6'7".
What's the difference?
What am
Just cause. Got mollusks. Camels or house cats?
Mollusks, something, and house cats. What was the something?
Mollusks, camels, and house cats.
Ooh, I'm interested in camels. I don't know a lot about them.
I don't know anything about camels. Reagan is asked. Oh, jeez. Filthy combos.
Camels are one of the most
taste,
unorthodox
B tier
builds in the
nutrition.
game. In the right conditions, their combination of unique abilities and
I'll
special
accept
set
it.
of elemental resistances makes for a shockingly effective strategy. But overall, where do camels rank on the tier list? Is their weird shape and odd skill set actually overpowered, or is their current player base carried by their human allies?
There we
Today
go.
we'll discuss the history, stats, and abilities of the camel, and ultimately decide. We'll begin with the origin of the camel. Camels first began rising in the meta at a time when a lot of mammalian herbivore builds were really taking off. Some of these herbivores spec'd into an ability called rumination to gain bonus XP from the newly buffed grass spawn rates. Some herbivores spec'd into more powerful PvP abilities, like keratinized horns and armor, in order to remain more well defended when out in the open. The camel, by contrast, took neither of these paths.
I don't want to eat camel.
Because they could not digest grass, they instead
That
need to
much is
spec
true.
into abilities which would allow them to survive the frequent long treks between an ever-decreasing supply of nutritious tree leaves. So what are the camel's most important abilities? The most obvious one is their hump. The hump serves multiple purposes. Primarily, it's used as a site for fat storage, functioning as an energy reserve which allows camels to survive incredibly long journeys without access to food. With a maxed out fat reserve, camel players can ignore hunger damage for several months as they search for new spots to forage.
That's a
But
good
in
trait.
addition to providing starvation resistance,
So I don't know if he's going
allocating
to
all the
go
camel's
over it
body
in
fat
this
to one
video,
spot
but
gives them
that
excellent
fat
heat
storage has an
resistance,
interesting
allowing for
side effect,
extremely efficient heat.
which is that fat, once it is broken down by the body, one of the byproducts is water. And weirdly enough, the fat storage in the hump actually ends up turning into more water than the volume of fat in the hump,
That's pretty
which is crazy. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if he gets to it.
Heat exchange everywhere else on the surface of the camel's body. Now, of course, this ability does come at a cost. The hump is an awkward and cumbersome load to bear, weighing the camel down and making its
poor
movement
camel.
a lot more wobbly and top-heavy while running. Definitely not an ability you could just throw onto any other herbivore build and see benefit from. You need to have other abilities to help mitigate the weaknesses the hump incurs. So what other abilities does the camel have? The second main ability is the camel's feet pads. Rather than walking on hooved toes like most other herbivores, camels spec into large padded feet. Now, normally when a player spends their evolution points unlocking padded feet, they're doing so in
I
order
did not
to
think
mask
that
the
was
sound
what
of their
camels' feet
steps
look like.
and buff their
I
stealth
thought they had
stat.
hooves.
While it does technically offer a small stealth
They have
bonus,
cloven
something as
feet,
tall as
but
a camel is
the-
not going to be very successful
the
at hiding.
hooves have
Instead,
evolved
similar
into
to the hump,
soft
this
pads.
ability protects camels from the stress
Interesting.
and chip damage most players would accrue when walking for such long distances. It also spreads out their weight, preventing them from sinking into whatever surface they're standing on. This is especially important when
So the camel
traversing
survives
sandy or
longer than
snowy
Artax?
environments, as it negates the movement penalties from this sort of terrain. Camels have a few other minor abilities as well. Their sickle-shaped blood cells
Wait,
make
say
them
that
more
again?
resistant to dehydration.
Oh, the camel survives longer than Artax.
Everything survives longer than Artax.
Stupid horse.
And their tough, leathery mouth negates puncture damage, allowing the camel to be one of the few builds able to eat cacti without being hurt by their spines. A lot of players are under the impression that camels possess a powerful spitting ranged attack, similar to the cobra or archerfish. Unfortunately, no, there's not really anything particularly threatening about the camel's spit, nor do they actually employ this skill in combat. They may vomit when threatened, but this is usually just a result of stress, not a defensive ability. That's not to say the camel's mouth isn't dangerous.
Oh, that's
In addition
crazy
to their
looking.
tough, leathery palate, one of the things that sets camels apart from other herbivores is that their teeth can actually deal serious damage. And with a neck as long, powerful, and flexible as the camel's, there's not many
Exactly,
angles
Kyle.
you could attack a camel from without risking a nasty bite counterattack. Camels can also attack with their kicks, although their padded feet won't deal as much damage as, say, the sharp hooves of a zebra or giraffe. Anyway, those are the main abilities of the camel build. Next, let's look at the camel's stats. And quick note, I should mention that there are two variations of camel, the dromedary and Bactrian. Their most apparent difference is that the dromedary has 1 hump while the Bactrian has 2. But honestly, the more important difference is in their base stats. Bactrians are larger, more powerful, and better adapted to the cold. The dromedary is smaller but slightly more agile and better suited for extreme heat. Camels have slightly above average intelligence, necessary for them to be able to remember the long routes that they travel on. As mentioned earlier, camels do have a more damaging bite than most herbivores, but compared to the damage large herbivores can dish out using their tusks or horns, they still fall short. Their defenses are quite strong, especially when it comes to elemental resistances. But on top of those, the camel's height makes it very difficult for predators to land an attack on them. Thanks to their special terrain movement bonuses, most of the time they don't even need to worry about predators, as no sane player would seriously try to follow them into an inhospitable desert. But even on normal solid ground, the camel's movement speed is pretty decent, albeit kind of awkward. Obviously, even with their padded feet slightly dampening the sound of their steps, their stealth is still abysmal, given that camels are the 3rd tallest land animal after the giraffe and elephant. And lastly, their perception is pretty normal for a mammal, except for the camel's partial immunity to the blindness condition, on account of their long eyelashes, which block incoming sand and dust. This is all well and good, but the question remains, just how viable is this setup really? Is the camel just another build completely carried by humanity? So the camel is actually one of the more recent additions to the humans' party, with domestication being unlocked during the mid to late Bronze Age, well after dogs, cats, and horses had already formed alliances with humanity. And it was with the last one, horses, that camels were competing with for the spot on the team, as both horses and camels are useful to function as a mount. Horses are the faster mount, and in a lot of scenarios that's truly all that matters. In Bronze Age human versus human PvP, being able to outmaneuver and flank their enemies was one of the most important factors in securing victory. But for just about everything else, camels were far more reliable. Camels have a higher equipment load, meaning they can carry much more cargo. They have higher vitality and defense, and thus can carry human players a much further distance in much worse conditions. And of course, the fact that they are not impeded by difficult terrain is a huge perk for choosing the camel. It's for this reason that as humanity began transitioning away from a nomadic raiding playstyle and towards Bronze Age palace-based economies, having a mount that could carry goods across the vast deserts of human empires was of vital importance. Camels were the only
what do they do with the
viable option
leftover
for humans
camels?
to cross the large deserts, like the Outback, Sahara, and
Mostly
Mojave,
tourism.
until humanity unlocked trains on the tech tree. So for a substantial length of time,
Yeah, we
camels
got
were
there.
an integral
Damn it,
part
Moon.
of the
You were
economy
ahead of the
across
game.
most of the world. And although railroads have made them obsolete in some servers, when it comes to crossing the desert, they are still genuinely one of the best options. Similar to horses and cattle, the vast majority of camel players are purely opting for the human-focused team combo
wants to
playstyle.
eat that
There are
thing?
only around 1,000 players who are part of the truly wild faction that never joined up with humans. Does this mean without humans, camels would be low-tier trash? I can see why you might jump to that conclusion. Despite their immense physical strength, I rated domestic cattle as
I don't mean
B-tier,
anything,
in
Kyle.
part because
Truce,
without humanity,
truce.
it's unclear if they could even survive in the wilderness. Honestly, B-tier might have even been too generous. But there's no question, when left to fend for themselves in the wilderness, camels not only survive, they thrive. When humanity unlocked the motorized transport tech, many human players kicked out the camel players from their party. This happened in America, in the Middle East, and most significantly in Australia. Now, an invasive mammal succeeding in Australia is really not that big a surprise, but thriving in the outback specifically is undoubtedly impressive. Here, they must contend with one of the other most successful Australian invaders, the dingo. And let's be real, it's not even close to being an even matchup. Being historically from Asia, camels
Dingoes
had to
are
contend with
filthy.
everything from lions and leopards to wolves and even tigers. So despite their awkward top-heavy appearance and lack of powerful damage-dealing abilities, their incredible survival skill earns them the rank of A tier. Now, this video focused specifically on
This
the
goofy
Bactrian
thing is
and
A
dromedary
tier?
camel, the two builds most
Yes,
players
it
would
is.
associate with the word camel. But the camel faction does technically contain two other builds, the llama and alpaca. These belong to the player base of prehistoric camels, which chose to venture south into the South America server, rather than across the Bering Strait and into Asia. Because of their vastly different environments, they obviously spec into different abilities. However, a lot of their core features are more or less the same. I have a lot to say about these creatures, mostly that they are the most disgusting, nasty creatures I've ever encountered. Alright, so this ad is going to take a bit of a
Yeah,
different
no, it's
turn
not
than usual,
camels
but
that
here's the
spit,
deal.
it's fucking
A few months
llamas.
ago, I got a message from the team at Wendover Productions asking
Aladdin
if I
lied
wanted
to
to be on a
us.
game show. Considering this is the same team that makes the show Jet Lag the Game, I immediately said yes. And as a result of this decision, I ended up being on a
It is
wild, crazy show
11:30.
that ultimately
I'm tired, so I'm going to bed.
Been a blast, AnCom.
Indeed, it has. Y'all have a good one and have a good holiday.
Wait, one last thing.
Whatever you happen to do.
Last thing, absolute last thing.
Yeah.
This was crazy to me.
This fish is worth more than you. It's the most expensive fish in the world, a Japanese koi that sold at auction for $1.8 million. On the other hand, we have this fish, who ain't worth a damn thing. It's a carp you can buy it at the grocery store for like $2 to $5 a pound. But what I didn't know is that these are the same fish. Yeah, I know, I don't believe it either, okay, but check this out. There's a lot of different kinds of wild carp, like this one, and what's that, the mystery carp? Give me a break. Long ago, in Japan, people started to divert water and create ponds to keep the carp as stockfish. And that was kind of their only relationship with humans for a very long time. About 1,000 years ago, we get the first text that mentioned colored carp, like blue and black and white and red. These were just random mutations that happened that kind of just remained an oddity for a long time. But by the beginning of the 1800s, people started to mess with this for themselves. Some breeders started to select fish with unique traits like colors and patterns.
Artificial selection creates all sorts of weird shit.
Unbelievable ornamental fish, eventually giving us the koi that we have today. A living work of art created over 200 years of selective breeding that turned an animal originally bred for its meat into one of the most valuable and collectible living things on the entire planet. If you like weird stuff like this, you should give me a follow, because now you know exactly why this.
All right, you have a good night, AnCom. Thank
All
you
right,
for
have a good one. Good night.
Watching the good stuff with me. And that was AnCom. All right, one last video, unless we have a request before I guess we wait out for the night. Rock lobster? I don't think I want to know. Birds' arms is weird. I don't even know what kind of bird that is. Oh, my mushrooms.
On three. 1, 2, hike!
Just in time for Thanksgiving. I almost need this filter. That's a moth, not even a bird. Fail this.
Yo voy a cantar esta canción, yo voy a cantar esta canción para mi gente. Con una pasión tan fuerte. Ay, 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 ahora sigo cantando y sigo gozando.
Exactly right.
Stars up above me, stars in my eyes.
It's how bizarre it is that makes it worth it.
What's up? What's
Oh, I can feel the sadness. I lied, I got one more.
Here we go. At the top,
hey.
On a roll. And it's time to run it up, yeah, you know. Maxed out, put the pedal to the floor. Hey, on a roll.
Since it's been a minute since the Master Ken, this dude is great.
Today, you will witness my most spectacular demonstration yet. Defending 8 attacks consecutively.
Unexpected.
The
No,
world
that
record
doesn't
is
work.
6. Enjoy. Hi!
I'm gonna slice you like a tomato!
What did I do, Kyle? I called for a truce.
Give me your money right now! Lies. Damn that stroke. So.
Just an innocent janitor.
Sweep the leg!
My room!
Mine! Ninja sword!
Unexpected. Coming to a theater near you.
We're gonna have to watch this movie.
I'm just trying to do everything I can to get my family back.
Freaking ridiculous. Matt Walsh is in it. It probably can't be funny then. Right? Why not? Alright, so who's still streaming right now? Ranger and Rogue, Rhizome.
I'll give you 1/5 of my cookies.
Yeah, I guess Ranger and Rogue. Alright, y'all. Not Ranger. Who to raid then? Who we got? Some dude named Ray Shizzle. Let's go with that. Got 8 people watching. I just like sending out the smaller channels. Like sending you guys off to Rhizome, as much fun as it is there. He has like 385 viewers, so he'll be just fine. All right, y'all, it's been a blast. Thank you for coming in and watching animals and the evolution of animals and how they survive in the wild. I had fun. I hope you did too. Catch you next time. It'll probably be Kung Fu Joe screaming at someone again. Have a good